Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Thursday, March 2nd, and I hope you all are having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we will head over to Allen, where he sits down with Brian Singer, co-founder and chief product officer at Noble9, to talk about its recently received strategic investments from ServiceNow and Cisco Investments to continue building its SLO product. Then Allen meets with Brendan O'Leary, head of community at ProjectDiscovery.io, to discuss his new role, which is on a mission to democratize security. We will then air two sessions from the DevOps Experience. In the first session, Brad Maltz, Senior Director of DevOps Portfolio and Developer Relations at Dell Technologies, talks about the 3 ops models you need to implement for your business to thrive in a multi-cloud world: DevOps, DataOps, and FinOps. Then Mike O'Malley, Senior Vice President of Strategy for Seneca Global, looks at the new paradigm that organizations need to adopt to support the new distributed workforce and the decentralization of IT. Next, we are airing an episode of The Haunted Hacker with Mike Jones. In this episode, Mike Jones speaks to former FBI agent Kurt Swiezdak for the final part of their discussion about corruption and electronic surveillance. Then Mitch will sit down with Kevin Mattice, Chief Product Officer at Cherry, to talk about the differentiator between a good data strategy and a bad one. We will then wrap up this broadcast with 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike Vizard interviews David Reber, Chief Security Officer and Head of Product Security at NVIDIA, as David explains why it will become simpler for cybersecurity teams to benefit from artificial intelligence as data science continues to evolve. Then Mike interviews Anna Poblitz, Head of Passwordless for 1Password, as Anna explains how the journey to eliminating passwords as part of an effort to improve the state of cybersecurity is progressing. And that's what we have coming up for you on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for March 2nd. First up, the U.S. government's initiative to bolster the semiconductor industry is officially underway with the first Chips for America funding opportunity. As part of the $52 billion CHIPS Act that was signed last year, this funding opportunity is part of $39 billion earmarked for semiconductor manufacturing incentives. This first funding opportunity will focus on projects around leading-edge logic fabrication facilities and chip manufacturers, with specific production capacity goals for current generation semiconductors. The program will also include strict guidelines for how the funding is used, with payments being tied to meeting specific milestones. While the first recipients won't be announced for some time, hopeful applicants can submit their statements of interest to the CHIPS program office later this month. Next, the White House has ordered all federal agencies to remove the TikTok app from their government devices within 30 days due to security concerns. The Office of Management and Budget considers this step a crucial measure to address the risks presented by the Chinese-owned social media app to sensitive government data. While some government departments, such as the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, and State, have already put in restrictions, the rest of the federal government has been directed to follow the same guidelines. This move comes after several lawmakers have already limited the use of the app, which permits TikTok for use in individuals dealing with national security, law enforcement, and research. Despite TikTok's enormous popularity, concerns persist that the app could give China control of American user data, given that it is owned by ByteDance. In other news, Tesla plans to establish an electric vehicle plant in Mexico. The plant, which will require an investment around $5 billion, will fund the installation of the world's largest electric vehicle plant in Monterrey. The plant is expected to generate approximately 6,000 jobs and to produce 1 million electric vehicles for the Mexican market and for export. The investment came after 14 months of hard work, and the project will focus on manufacturing smaller cars. This being said, some have previously expressed preference for the plant to be built in the south of the country to avoid water scarcity issues. But Tesla has reportedly made environmental commitments, including using recycled water throughout the manufacturing process. Next up, the U.S. Marshals Service experienced a significant cyber attack where hackers stole confidential information, such as personally identifiable data of employees and investigation targets. The Justice Department has initiated an investigation into the matter, and the agency has disconnected the affected system from the network. Zooming out, ransomware attacks have been an increasingly significant concern for cybersecurity, targeting government agencies, hospitals, and schools. For the U.S. Marshals Service, which is accountable for capturing fugitives, escorting federal prisoners, and safeguarding witnesses, it raises questions of its and the Justice Department's cybersecurity protocols. On Digital CXO, we have an article about what enterprises can learn from the airline industry troubles. Airlines have been setting bad examples for system availability and resilience, having flight delays and technical woes. But this being said, airlines have begun investing more into technology infrastructure to drive the information systems needed for air travel. To learn more, go to digitalcxo.com. On Container Journal, we have an article that looks at how VMware extended its service management and orchestration framework in order to make it run virtualized radio access network functions on a bare metal server. VMware has stated that the goal is to give service providers a control plane for both container network functions and virtual network functions. To learn more, go to containerjournal.com. Finally, on Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at the top 10 open source software risks of 2023. Many rely on open source software, but relying on open source could cause security issues if not properly managed. This article looks at Endor Labs' list of the top 10 open source software risks for 2023. To learn more, go to securityboulevard.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. My next guest is Brian Singer from Noble 9. And we've had Brian on before. Of course, we usually have my friend Kit Merker. Kit's a little under the weather, so Brian stepped up, and we appreciate it. Hey, Brian, welcome. How are you?
I'm happy to be here. Yeah, you're stuck with me today, but I'll do the best I can to fill those big shoes.
Yeah, some may think of it as an upgrade, but, we'll let Kit have his day. Anyway, hey, Brian, I think most of our audience is familiar with Noble 9, right?
Yep.
SRE, SLOs, really kind of bringing SLOs to the forefront. But for those who maybe aren't, I feel like we're obligated to tell them a little bit about Noble 9, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Noble 9, we started the company about 3 years ago to try to improve the outcomes when it comes to reliability. So we kind of have a saying we talk about internally that reliability is something that has to be engineered. It's something that has to be focused on, and time has to be spent on it. Otherwise, it's just kind of a wishful thinking, right? And we see the impact of that with very visible issues when companies run into reliability challenges. And so we started Noble 9 to try to address that. And one of the ways that we do that is by helping companies implement and use service level objectives to try to find the right level of reliability for a given service and manage to that. And I know we've talked about service level objectives quite a bit, but just a quick refresher, a service level objective is just basically saying this is the latency, or this is the throughput, or this is the availability that I'm trying to achieve for a given service or user journey or API endpoint or, anything that I'm managing. And so, we kind of started, we built a platform. We have, dozens of customers using this today to really run their operations through the lens of, what the goals are when it comes to reliability.
Absolutely. Very cool. I think that's a good baseline for people. So Brian, I have been on the road. I was out in Asia. It took me forever to get back here, and I'm busy with some other stuff. But while I was gone, Noble 9 made an announcement about some new funding. And I mean, look, everybody, well, it used to be everybody made announcements every day about funding. Of course, we don't see quite as many for quite as much money as we did, let's say, a year or two ago. But your announcement was interesting in that it was really a strategic funding round with some kind of household names, not the usual VC crowd.
Yeah.
Why don't you, if you don't mind, share with the audience a bit?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's no secret that the current environment is a difficult one to raise money in. VC investing was way down in 2022. And so we have some incredible backers today that continued to support us in this round, like CRV and Battery Ventures and Resolute Partners. But we were also able to find some new partners to bring in that were really excited about what we're doing in the space of service level objectives. And that included ServiceNow and Cisco, who came in as strategic backers for us. Strategic just means, it's not a VC, and it's a sort of corporate VC. And so we're really excited to have those partners on board for the journey. And they've been incredibly helpful already. And we're excited to see what new things we can do with that money.
Absolutely. Well, look, I spent 20 plus years in the VC startup game. I mean, it's strategic in that it's more than just money. These companies can bring access to markets. Oftentimes you'll see it as part of a team offering or a partnered offering or even an OEM type of offering. And of course, companies like a ServiceNow, which is, just a monster, right, of a company, as well as Cisco, right? I mean, these are big companies with big channels and markets that exposing, the service, the Noble 9 service, SLO stuff to those channels can open, many doors that.
Yeah. That's certainly one of our goals. I think, and when companies like that make an investment, obviously they want to see that, they look at it as an investment, right? And sometimes there's strategic elements to it, but obviously they want to help that investment be successful. So, we're excited to have their support.
Very cool. So congratulations on that. And I think we gave it the requisite 4 or 5 minutes it deserves here on our 15-minute.
Yeah, not too much time. It is what it is.
Yeah, but congratulations. Now, raising money, especially in this climate, isn't easy, and getting strategic money is strategic. But let's pivot a little bit. You guys also made an announcement recently on some new capabilities and new additions to the Noble 9 suite, if you can call it that.
Yes.
Tell us.
So this was actually today. We announced a new capability called the Service Level Analyzer. And this is really exciting for me because I think it unlocks the potential of SLOs for a much broader audience of people. Since we started the company, one of the first things people ask is, well, these SLOs sound great in theory, but how do I get started? I have a API and I know the latency of that API, or I have a time series that gives me the latency of that API. But what's the right threshold to set for that SLO? What's the right target to set for that SLO? And until now, the answer for pretty much everyone is, well, sort of create an SLO, just put in some, whatever and see how it runs for a month or 2 months and then look at it. And so you can see that, it's kind of hard because you don't really have that guidepost of where to start. Well, the service level analyzer lets you take any time series from one of our supported data sources and very quickly do what if analysis. So you can say, oh, if I set a threshold here for this API and this was my target, how much error budget would I have burned over this historical period? And so you very quickly start to understand what those different thresholds mean and whether you're actually meeting maybe what your definition of reliable is. And so that's really exciting because you go from, it taking maybe a month or 2 months to start coming up with meaningful SLOs to being able to come up with meaningful targets and meaningful goals in a matter of minutes and turn those into then SLOs, which guide your operation. So this is, I think pretty foundational, and I think it solves the problem that a lot of companies have that are excited about SLOs and the potential, but maybe they've had trouble rolling them out in the past because it's just hard to get people past that initial, like, okay, what do I do now? And so that capability is now available in the product. Anyone that wants to try it can sign up for our free tier. We don't charge for the analyzer in the free tier. So you can just, sort of start modeling out different scenarios and seeing how much error budget you would have used.
Excellent. I love it. So the announcement was, the day we recorded this, but it, probably a couple of days from there before people are seeing this. It's available right now, though, as well. People can go get their hands on it and start using it.
That's right. You go to noble9.com, sign up for the free edition of Noble 9. It includes I think 25 SLOs for free. But using the analyzer doesn't really consume that at all. So you can just, start trying. And one of the really cool things that this unlocks is, let's say you had an incident in the past, right, that was captured in the data. Well, now you can actually pull the data from that time when you had the incident into the analyzer. And then you can say, okay, give me something that would have consumed all of my error budget during this incident, right? Because we know that this was customer impacting. And now we can model out these different scenarios and do that what if analysis and turn that into a really meaningful SLO in just a matter of minutes. And I think that's part of it. That's, sort of part of the capability that's exciting, the most exciting for me.
Excellent. Very cool. Hey, we've got a few minutes left. Let's quickly talk about, is it SLO Conf coming up?
That's right. It's coming up in May. I don't have the dates memorized like Kit probably would, but if you go to the slowconf.com website, you can sign up now. I think the CFP closed. There were an astounding number of really strong submissions for talks at SlowConf this year, the most we've ever had. And I know talking to Alex Hidalgo, who was working on sort of managing that process, that there's some really exciting talks just in some areas that are pushing the boundaries of SLOs. But then there's also the foundational stuff of how do I get started? How do I sell this internally? How are different companies using SLOs today, getting value from SLOs? So I'm really excited to see as it starts to come together. We've had, I think, pretty strong number of registrations already. But don't wait to sign up. Keep registering, and we'll see. I'm sure you'll talk to Kit probably around that time as well.
We'll talk to one of you guys way before then. But you can get more information on it at SLO Conf. Yep. All right. Hey, Brian. I think we covered what we had to cover here, man. I want to wish you guys success. Congratulations on the money raise. Congratulations on the new functionality, and keep up the great work, man. It's a pleasure having you guys on here.
Great. Yeah, it's great to see you, Alan. Thanks for having us on today, and look forward to the next time we chat.
All right, tell Kit we hope he feels better as well, and we'll be in touch.
All right, will do.
All right. Noble 9 here on Techstrong.com, Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. You know, I've been waiting to do this interview for, it feels like 2 months already or more. But, you know, first time, long time, or whatever it is from radio. He's a long-time guest on our show. He's been on, he had his own show on here with us, but it was always at GitLab, and he's at a new place now, and I'm excited to tell you and have him tell you all about it. Let me reintroduce you to my friend Brendan O'Leary. Hey, Brendan, how are you, man?
Hey, Alan, thanks so much for having me back on. And yeah, I feel like this might have been one of the longest times we've gone without talking, you know, with me in my transition and the holidays and all that. Yeah.
I get it. I kept saying, didn't we schedule with Brendan? Yeah, it's coming up. And then, you know, life gets in the way.
Exactly.
Anyway, it's good to see you. You're not at GitLab. You're at Project Discovery. Is that like the official name?
That's correct. Yeah.
And it's projectdiscovery.io. Is that?
Yeah, that's the website. Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So tell us, what's the deal here, Brendan? What's it about?
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm really excited. I got the opportunity to head up the community team here at Project Discovery, and we're a small venture-backed startup in the security engineering space. And the thing that got me excited about it is there's already a huge community of users that use our tools. So we're probably best known for our tool named Nuclei, which is a kind of a dash scanner plus. It does a lot of template-based scanning. So you basically define a YAML template, and it runs scans against your infrastructure based on that. And then we have a number of other tools that are used kind of throughout the bug bounty and penetration testing community. And so for me, it was really exciting to join this community of people and hopefully, help grow it. And then also, a very important space in security. It's something you and I have talked about for years, and I'm really excited to now be kind of on the red team, if you will, right? In with the penetration testers and bug bounty hunters and those folks that are really focused on the modern security engineering stack. And so it's exciting.
Absolutely. So I love kind of that aspect of security. It's something I've seen develop over the years. And what I really like about it too is there's also sort of a crowdsourcing model to it at some level, right? The best example is my friend Carolyn Wong, who's over at Cobalt.io, right? Cobalt does pen testing and very much in a crowdsourced type of model. And I think it's a great model because you're engaging that community.
Yeah, I agree. And that's part. And Cobalt's good friends of ours, and I think that model is critical, right? It's something we've seen such success with in DevOps, and bringing together developers and operators. And I'm hoping that we're going to see that success again in really finally bringing together developers and security professionals, right? Our mission actually is to democratize security, which is a big, hairy, audacious goal. But it's, our tools are all open source, and that's a little bit unheard of in the security industry, right? The traditional security vendor is a very closed source proprietary vendor, which makes you kind of beholden to them, right? When a big security change like a Log4j comes out, you have to, wait and hope that they quickly get, a new signature pushed to their proprietary system. Whereas for us, when that happened, within an hour or two of that being announced, there was a Nuclei template that you could then go use to scan your entire infrastructure to say, where are we vulnerable to this vulnerability? And that didn't come from Project Discovery, the company. It came from our open source community, right? And so that power of the both crowdsourcing, right? The most advanced enterprises are using bug bounty programs to crowdsource folks looking at their external attack surface. And then, open source is the ultimate crowdsourcing, right? Get all of the best and brightest security engineers together to work on security together. And I think that's something that we saw I've seen in the DevOps industry in my time there, spent a long time there, and I'm hoping that we can make that successful, in security. And, people say DevSecOps and, kind of roll their eyes, but I do think that is the right way to think about it, right? DevOps was very successful in getting everyone together, everyone around the same table, and really focused on solving the problems together rather than each trying to solve them in our individual silos. I think that's what we need to really solve the problem of security in software and in the enterprise.
Brendan, as someone who's been involved in security now for 25 plus years, it's what's old is new again, right? Because when I first got into security, right, even the commercial vendors, when you looked under the covers, they were using things like Nmap and Nessus and Snort and ClamAV, right? And then they built successful commercial product on top of that. Like my friend Marty Roche, who started SourceFire, Marty Resch. I called him Roche all these years and found out it's really Resch. But Marty started SourceFire, with Snort and kept Snort open source, but the rules, the Snort, checks, this became sort of not proprietary, but proprietary, not
they
open.
monetized around, sure.
Yeah, they monetized it. My friend Ron Guler from Tenable, who had Nessus, they did a separate thing, right? They kind of stopped production of Nessus as an open source tool around 2.7 or something, and kind of closed it up there. But so many other companies, forked it from there, and we're still using, in essence, NASL scripts.
Sure.
Right, for every time a CVE came out or something.
Exactly.
And, then it seems like somehow the security industry made a left turn and got away from all that open source kind of, foundational stuff. And now to hear it coming back, it's good. It does my heart good.
Yeah.
I like it. I'll tell you something else. DevOps is DevSecOps. I don't think anyone rolls, and people who, there might be people who roll their eyes, but the people who roll their eyes at it are out of touch. I am looking forward. In April, we'll be at RSA conference, right? And I put on the DevSecOps event there every year on the usually, COVID screwed things up, but we're back to Monday of RSA week again at the Moscone Center. We're there all day, and the theme of this year's DevSecOps is DevOps is DevSecOps. And I actually got it from Ashley Kramer from GitLab, who was very boldly saying that. I had done a panel with, I think it was Ashley, it was Fred Prince, from one of the co-founders of JFrog, and the CEO of CloudBees. And I had one other person who, I think it was Tracy Reagan, who you probably know as well, from Linux Foundation.
Very well.
And that was the theme that they all came upon, is that today, DevOps, it's DevSecOps. And it's all about that. So I think you're right in the right place at the right time here.
Yeah.
With
I totally
Project
agree.
Discovery.
Yeah, I
Very
agree.
cool.
And I think, our approach when we're looking at that open source world is to keep anything that an individual user cares about open source, right? Because that gives us that power, right? Our community that power. And like you said, it goes back to the very first days of, computer and network security of any type, right? It was crowdsourced at the time, right? The early days of DEF CON, right? It was the folks in the room that knew what they were talking about, getting together and understanding and sharing and text files about, how things worked. And it took industry a while to accept that, right? The large software makers to accept that, they were going to have a part of that. Whereas today you see, large enterprises embracing bug bounty hunting, right? And so it is very interesting that what's old is new again, like you said.
Yep.
What we want to do is we want to monetize around, again, the things that an enterprise would care about, the things that are, make nuclei powerful at scale, right? And so that's what we're doing with Nuclei Cloud, that we actually just recently announced the private beta of. And we want to focus on those things that go beyond the individual, but talk about what the organization cares about, right? So that's like time to remediation, direct two-way integration with ticketing systems, being able to run nuclei at scale without having to, spin up your own hardware. And so I think that, resolution and remediation cycle is the thing that, a bug bounty hunter wants to find the bug, report it, and then, get paid by the organization. The organization wants to find it and then be able to remediate it, and then also make sure it doesn't happen again. So include, that scan that found the bug, include that now in every regression test and every CI/CD pipeline, so we know it doesn't come back again. And so that's really what we're looking to do, so that we hope that we can both, build a sustainable business model that then is able to sustain our open source, indefinitely. That's kind of our goal.
Absolutely, very cool. We mentioned projectdiscovery.io, but it's Nucleide, right?
Nuclei is the main product, right? Yeah. So
right.
Discovery.io, you can find all of our products. So we have other open source tools outside of Nuclei. Our offering that brings them all together is called Nuclei Cloud. And
that's the cloud.
Yep.
But I'm assuming they can find Nuclei on GitHub or...
Yeah, you can go to GitHub. Of course, if you go to projectdiscovery.io, you can find all of our things. Click right through to GitHub. But then also it's Project Discovery on GitHub. So if you look at our organization there, you can see all of our open source projects. So we have, ones that are around port scanning. We have projects around, attack surface management, right? So a big challenge for a large enterprise or someone trying to do bug bounty hunting against large enterprises. What assets exist out there on the public internet? What external assets exist that I can scan against? So we have tooling around that. And then some other specialized tooling for things like DNS and TLS and kind of more specific vulnerability scanning.
Very cool. So Brendan, your role is head of community. Share with the audience how do you view your mission as head of community there?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I believe and our investors and our leadership believe that the community is one of our greatest, if not our greatest assets, right? And so that makes the head of community role really important, because my job is to both protect and nurture and also grow that asset. So I think, we've had this great organic community come out of just, the kind of picturesque open source story, right? Our founders met on GitHub. They didn't even realize they were both living in the same city in India at the time, because they met through GitHub and worked on these tools together. And then were convinced by actually the CISO of Robinhood to quit their day jobs and start the company. And so that was really exciting, and the community grew really organically around that. But I think we have a huge opportunity, when we look at our mission of democratizing security, to make sure that we have a really open and welcoming community. The security community is really opening and welcoming, but you don't always know that until you walk in the front door. And so we want to make the front door be wide open for folks to come in, if they're just getting started with bug bounty, or if they're, an advanced pen tester at an enterprise. We want all of those folks to feel really welcome. And so I think my number one job is that, making sure the front door is wide open. And then after that, I think it's, making sure that we're delivering on our promises to the community about, sustaining our open source tools. There are a lot of tools in security that get written and then not maintained. And so we want to really focus on that not happening for us, right? And that would probably be the secondary goal for me, right? Is to make sure that we're sustaining and giving back to the community that's given so much to us.
I love it. It's excellent, man. So Brendan, you also had several positions with Linux foundations and projects. Does that carry over, or are you kind of putting that on the back burner as you focus on this new role?
Yeah, so I did leave my governing board seat on the CNCF when I changed my role, but I'm still going to be heavily involved with those groups. I'm also hoping to get more involved with the OpenSSF, right, as we look at software security. And so again, we're really new and we're still kind of exploring that environment, but I really hope that we can be a force, there in the security engineering space, and bringing that to, the CNCF, the OpenSSF and the Linux Foundation as a whole. That I have great friends there, and so they're not going to get rid of me that easy.
Good. Hey, man, Brendan, congratulations on the move. I think it's excuse me. I think it's a great role for you. I think they're very lucky to have you there with your many talents. But I think there's a bright future for Project Discovery, and make the most of it, man. Yeah,
I appreciate that. And I think I'm working on. I'll announce it for the first time in public on your show.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to put together a happy hour at RSA. So if you're there, I'd love to invite you.
The problem
now I'm committing to it because I'm putting it on there.
The problem, Brendan, is there's nowhere to make it. Everything's closed around there.
So that problem I've solved actually already. So one of our investors, I've secured their space actually already. So it might
works. Let me know when it is, and we'll publicize it. Obviously, we'll be there all week.
Sure.
As long as you're going to be there, come visit us on Broadcast Alley as well.
Yeah, definitely going to be there. So that would be good.
All right, man. Fantastic. Brendan, it's great to catch up with you. Don't be a stranger now. Come on.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Alan.
All right, Brendan O'Leary, head of community at Project Discovery, Nuclei, and a few other open source projects. Check them out at projectdiscovery.io. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in a moment.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hi, everybody. Brad Maltz here. I'm a Senior Director of the DevOps portfolio and the DevRel organization at Dell Technologies. And today, what I'd like to talk to you about is how DevOps is not your final destination. I believe there's more beyond DevOps that you are going to have to drive towards. Now, before I get into the slide deck, I want to make sure that you understand kind of at least a high-level view from 2 seconds of what I mean by DevOps. When I talk about DevOps, I'm talking about how DevOps is the operating model. It's a cultural shift that the business is trying to go through to allow operations to align closer to the application developers in the business. And with that being said, what's happening here is in a DevOps model, there's a notion that application developers should start doing more operations. Well, that's just not the case. What the application developers are really trying to do is their job is to deliver application features and application code to the end users, the customer base of the business. That means that they don't want to go and work on operational automation, work on support of the applications from a infrastructure up perspective. So in this world, when we talk about application developers not wanting to do operations, that means the operations falls back onto the actual IT ops people. When we talk about the IT ops person, of course, they've been working in this world for a very long time. They've been doing storage operations, server operations, network, virtualization. You can go up and down the stack. And IT ops has always worked at the command line. They've always had to do things like bash scripting, PowerShell, as well as working within the element managers. But what DevOps is introducing and the notion of cloud native technologies is that finally they have to figure out how to actually go beyond PowerShell and beyond standard scripting practices. They have to learn to get closer to a software developer. They have to learn languages and concepts that are pushing the boundaries of what their existing knowledge base is. And when you talk about what they're really forced to think about in this world, a developer from an infrastructure developer standpoint, that is the DevOps person type of role now, we're talking about automation technologies, right? Pipeline management, the developer tools for their end user who is the application developer. There's a lot of these concepts that are being thrown at these DevOps people. Well, part of the problem they're running into is they have all this stuff being thrown at them. They still have to figure out how to manage more of the traditional legacy stuff, unless you're totally born in the digital age and you don't have to deal with legacy applications. And the reality is, as they're going through this, there's other pieces of the business that have to get pulled in. And this is where I believe DevOps is not the end state. Now, just to kind of continue down the DevOps discussion that we're having for a minute, one of the enablers in the bigger context of DevOps in the industry right now is the abstraction, right? And this is where things like virtualization for the past 20 years or so has really taken off and become the de facto standard abstraction. And more recently, probably over the past 5 or 6 years, Kubernetes has now kind of superseded that as the next level abstraction. And as we talk about that, the abstractions are key. Whether you're talking about abstractions up in the DevOps level, at the data level, across clouds, this is really where the notion of moving beyond DevOps starts to get interesting, because the reason Kubernetes and the abstraction has won here is it gave folks the ability to encapsulate the application, which prior to Kubernetes, it was kind of like the wild, wild west in how you dealt with applications. When an application developer delivered an application, it could be packaged a million different ways. It had specific requirements that were very unique to the application without any standardization under the covers. Kubernetes is kind of trying to constrain that into a world where the abstraction of Kubernetes actually is helping DevOps become more proficient and efficient in what they're actually going to do. Now, taking that one step further is where automation comes in. And again, hitting on the ops side of DevOps, your job as the IT ops person that's transitioning into a DevOps operating model is to automate your own job, the things you would have done manually before. When you start thinking about how you want to go down the road and automate your OS deployments, or if you want to automate your server and storage pieces of the landscape, the goal there is you would have been doing these manually before. Or you would have had some processes within the organization where it made sense for how you ran the process, but they were still manual processes, even though you documented them. When you get into an automation conversation, the goal here is to understand how you were doing those in the manual world, understand if the manual way is still the right way going into the new world, and sometimes you just got to mimic that manual way within code using tooling like Ansible and Terraform. And when you go down that road, then what you're really looking at that point is, how do I keep building my portfolio of automation to stop having to run those manual processes? And this entire continuum is more of an ops conversation than it is a full dev conversation. You need to use dev skills in this world, but you're doing it from an IT operations infrastructure developer perspective. Now, the issues that I'm seeing happening in the industry are, this is age old. These are not new, right? One of the biggest ones that's out there is the notion of boundaries. Sometimes people are asked to kind of not do something because it's not part of their team. There's a political boundary, an organizational boundary. And when you're dealing with the boundaries in this case, that's what you need to start to break down when you're trying to solve operational efficiency conversations, whether it's DevOps or any other operational types of conversations. You also have people that love to drive process. And one of the other pieces of this operational transformation that people have to go under is to actually become more agile. And in an agile world, sometimes heavy process, or actually most times I'll say heavy process, is actually the enemy. What we're actually looking to do is, as you try to figure out to break down the boundaries, you also have to understand how to optimize the processes. And the key there is to have everybody targeting the same outcome. We as a business want to go fix this problem. We as a business want to become more agile from an operational perspective. The last part is what we call, and you've heard this before, it's not new, the golden path or the paved road, right? It's a concept that's been in DevOps for many, many, many years. And when a business is first trying to make that pivot into a DevOps mindset or DevOps culture, one of the first things they're dealing with is my developers have been using like 100 different tools and 100 different platforms. And how do I wrangle that down? And sometimes you have to start with a ton of constraints. And that's where the golden path kind of comes in. It's the ability to give your end users, your consumers, a structured, constrained set of tooling and platforms that you have the ability to operationalize as simply as possible, and they have the ability to deliver against their jobs also as efficiently as possible. So these are three issues that I see popping up across the board when we deal with any type of an operational transformation. Now, what we're going to spend the rest of the session on is actually this slide. I have no more slides, which should help a lot. And what I believe is DevOps is, as you can see here, it's the tip of the spear. It's the first leg of the trifecta, as we sometimes talk about it. Because as we just described in a DevOps world, DevOps is going after infrastructure and application level automation, lifecycle management types of things. And that includes everything from platform tooling for developer tools, pipelines, all the way down through the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service type of stuff, including how you package and deliver the applications on top of a containerized Kubernetes style world, or even maybe in a legacy-ish oriented virtualized world. Well, if a business achieves some level of maturity in DevOps, they're still missing the two other pieces. The first piece is data ops. Just because you've solved the infrastructure and application side of the house, the business still needs to understand how their data is being operationalized, how it's being utilized, how it's being governed. Anytime that you build an application, there's some level of data. It could be a fairly stateless application that's ephemeral, that is maybe creating a little bit of very lightweight telemetry on the back end or logging or some other stuff, all the way down through your super heavy data-oriented applications like AI/ML applications or databases or other types of apps like that. In that case, the business starts to understand, how do we make sure that the data sets, not storage, storage is encompassed under the DevOps side of the world. From a data ops perspective, you're thinking data set, buckets, file systems, right? That's that level of data. And you want to make sure that you're controlling access to the data. You want to make sure that you understand the location of the data such that when the application is put into a certain location, whether it's in the public cloud or on premises or at the edge, then the data is in the right spot wherever it needs to be, whether it's on the receiving end somewhere else that the application can reach it, or is localized in the same locality as the application. So data ops is another part of the business that you as a end user have to start contextualizing to really move into a much more efficient and operationalized world. Now, these two pieces together are very interesting. But one thing that's missing is the business level controls. You have some of those with governance and compliance in the data ops game. You're missing the financial side. And this is where FinOps comes in. What happens here is if DevOps is going after infrastructure and application workload placement and kind of lifecycle management, then it has the ability to automate deployment of all those things and usage of all those resources across a multi-cloud world, an on-prem world, or even at the edge. And you can do that through a lot of the tools that we've already been talking about on the back end. And the data ops does the parallel effort from a data set perspective. What we haven't talked about is it the right location based on the cost, based on the procurement side of the business? From a financial perspective, what you need to do is you need to start applying some of those cost dynamics to make a decision that says, in a DevOps world, I should be using this compute and storage resource in this location tied to this application, because maybe for the next 6 months, it is more cost effective based on the resource needs. And the other part of the trifecta is, from a data ops perspective, the data also is living there. And all of a sudden, you can start building an algorithm that takes into account the cost metrics with the data governance and data lifecycle mixed with the infrastructure and application resource needs. That's when you start to really get to this point where you as a business have gotten fully operationalized. Now, of course, when you look at this world, a lot of the industry and myself, we like to use the term XOps, which is when I believe you're traversing beyond DevOps, which is one corner of the universe, and you're moving into trying to get to a much broader operational landscape. There's a lot of other ops terms that are out there, and I think this is one I want to connect some dots for you as well. GitOps, right? This is one that's much more of a technology-based conversation, especially in the DevOps and data ops space. The notion with GitOps and companies that are able to really become mature in the GitOps space, they're kind of some of the stronger, way more mature of the DevOps customers I've seen right now. The notion is you are handling version control from a Git repository with a continuous deployment mechanism tied to the front end of it. So as I just walked you through, it's a very technical side of this, which is all about continuous deployment and delivery, mixed with the notion of using code in more of a declarative way to manage state and version control in the deployment scenario. A GitOps conversation is still important with the trifecta because, as I said, you do it today in the DevOps space, but guess what? Data ops also over time will actually have implications here, because we should be able to version out data in the same way that we actually control versioning of infrastructure and applications, which means the GitOps principles over time should be able to be applied to data set management. And then when you apply financials in the decision tree of how GitOps actually works, now you start to become more interesting in actually automating the full life cycle of that. Another part of this, another term, is ML ops, machine learning ops. In the data science world, right, the AI ML space, this is another term that's very popular. And I actually like to embed ML ops across the DevOps and data ops, just like GitOps. For me, the definition of ML ops here is really the notion of we are building machine learning models and we have to manage the life cycle from training all the way up front in creation, all the way through deployment and inference, all the way out through the edge. And that means you got to deal with the life cycle of the data from training through inference. You have to deal with the model management under the covers, which, by the way, is where GitOps actually gets really interesting to tie them together. And when I look at ML ops, it's really a subset of DevOps and data ops, because the machine learning models are really an application level deployment scheme that you deal with in DevOps. They're just very well defined and specific from a requirements. What I mean by well defined is they tend to need GPUs or CPUs from a resource perspective. They tend to need certain types of data depending on the model you need, but you can understand the resources really nicely depending on how the model is being built. So very well-defined, but real-time defined applications are what lives in the ML ops space. The last ops that I'm going to kind of cover today is what we'll call AI ops. And this one is, I would say, a little bit more of a marketing term in the industry, in my opinion. From an AI ops perspective, depending on your definition, it could be how you use artificial intelligence to kind of do a lot of what we're talking about here. And I'm going to take that same angle, which is with AI ops, if I have all the criteria and the processes and the policies from DevOps, same thing from data ops, same thing from FinOps, now across all three of those, I should be able to build a fairly robust set of machine learning models and artificial intelligence models that allows me to turn those potentially originally automated processes into continuously automated processes in the AI ops space. What I mean by that is when you are building automation in a DevOps space, you're still managing the automation scripts. You still need to lifecycle manage how that workflow is going to be used as everything else gets versioned under the covers. GitOps starts to help there, but what you really want is you want a intelligent enough model under the covers that's watching that workflow with a defined set of criteria that it's actually able to perform the automation for you without having you needing to give any inputs into it. And this is why I believe until you get to a DevOps, DataOps, FinOps type of trifecta, you're never going to get to a true maturity level with AIOps, which at this point, you're talking many, many years down the road because we still have the other pieces of it that we're still working on at this point. So from a Dell Technologies perspective, we do play across all of these. We're always looking at how these are coming together because our customer base, especially since they're heavily on-prem mixed with a multi-cloud deployment today and growing into the edge, we're trying to understand how you can become a much more mature XOps shop going forward. And I hope today, maybe I framed it up in a different way that helps you understand my point of view and kind of what we've been talking to customers about out in the industry. So with that being said, thank you very much. I hope you had enjoyed listening to this and have a good rest of the conference.
Hi, my name's Mike O'Malley. I'm the SVP of Strategy for Seneca Global, and I want to talk to you today about employees everywhere, DevSecOps for distributed teams. Thanks for joining me. What I want to talk about today is how the world has changed, right? If you look at what's happening, with distributed workforces and coming out of COVID, right, we've got more and more independent business units, independent agile groups that work independently and maybe geographically very independent from each other that are all developing different applications within a company. And so because of that, we get much more growth, but much more distributed workforce. And as part of that, there are really good reasons to do that. First of all, with COVID, right, we saw more and more people weren't coming into the offices and were then in distributed teams, right? Either physically distributed teams or virtually distributed teams. And the big reason to do that is growth, right? As you move into a smaller, well-skilled team, you can get more things done, right? Think of it as a group project versus doing something on your own. You can get something on your own done very, very quick. It's probably not as thorough as what you're going to get done as a group project, but it can be done quickly. And you can think of decentralization very much in the same way, right? Instead of big, slow-moving organizations started to decentralize and break down their positions and break down their teams into smaller growth units so they have more autonomy and can do different things. And so that's great from a growth perspective, and that's great from an innovation perspective. But the one area that it's not great for is security posture. And the reason for that is because the security posture can't keep up. So if I look at what's the overall effect of the security posture, right? The change here is when I was centralized, this was the great old world of security, right? Everything was centralized and everybody was in buildings. And in that type of a model, right, I've got a very well-defined perimeter. I can put things like firewalls and things like that outside the perimeter, and I can protect everything inside because that's where everybody is. Now, I start to fast forward that, now when I move to a decentralized group and I have different groups everywhere, well, now I have multiple different perimeters, and that makes things slightly more complicated. But now if I add decentralization to that from an agile software development standpoint, now I've got everyone decentralized, but effectively everyone doing their own thing. And what that means from an agile software development standpoint is now I've got individual groups of people that are trying to innovate and code up new features and software development, but they're not using the same framework across that. They're making their own trade-offs in terms of the applications they use, maybe the subroutines they call for, if they're using open source code, maybe the different open source code platforms that they're using. And so what you end up is, from a software development standpoint, you end up with 6 or 8 or 10 totally different things instead of one unified object. And what that does in a security standpoint, from a security standpoint, is it gives you a very, very different threat surface. And what the threat surface is the threat surface is what we use in security to kind of define what are all the doors and windows into the software that a hacker could potentially get in. And what we see is when we start having multiple different agile software developments, we get a lot more doors and windows and a lot more things to secure. And we call that the threat surface. And we see the threat surface grow quite a bit in these decentralized organizations. So we've tried to solve this in the past, and the most comprehensive way to solve this in the past has been DevSecOps. And what DevSecOps is basically combining security with your DevOps group. So think of it as I'm doing agile software development. So I have a sprint of 3 or 4 features that I'm going through on, let's say, a bi-weekly basis. And every time I do those, work on those features, I'm looking at the security of those features and I'm patching vulnerabilities and I'm looking at what's the best way to do that as those features are developed and released, right? And so it's a good idea and has helped quite a bit, because then I'm not doing what people used to do, which is not take security application development into the last minute. And what we used to see people develop features or group of features, and after the feature was done, or maybe even sometimes done and released, that's when they would start looking at security, and then they would start doing things like bolt-on security solutions at the very, very end of the process on a software application to try to fix all the problems. And it's effectively, trying to secure a house after you've built it, right? Not a very good way to do things. And so what DevSecOps was trying to do is take that now and break it down and build security into the code development. And so that each time a new feature is being developed, I would then turn around and I would look at the security implications and patch that. Now, that sounds good, but now as I get more and more decentralized units, the software gets very, very complex, and it becomes very hard for each individual sprint unit to catch everything, especially when we start talking about regression testing and what a new feature may break in an old load of code. It becomes much more difficult to catch everything, and it leaves enterprises and it leaves sprint teams vulnerable. So the fix is something called planned SecOps. And this is a new and evolving concept. And what it is it's a security framework. So it goes before DevSecOps. So before I start writing code and looking at features and deciding what I need to do to secure those features, this is something that I do before a single line of code is written. So the benefits of it are pretty simple. It gives you planned security across all software development business units. So now, even though I am allowing my software organization, let's say, to break into business units, be very decentralized, and be very aggressive about going off in its own direction and growing, I have an overall security framework that it operates within. Meaning, as all features are coded up and software is developed, it comes within that same security framework, so that I know from a security standpoint that I'm in a good position basically to patch all, to lock all of the doors and windows in the same manner on all the different lines of code. And I don't have everybody just running off doing their own thing and creating this nightmare of new doors and windows that are left unlocked, right? And so the idea is, from an architecture standpoint, it's the idea of building a house, but now building a house and building security into the architectural plans, as opposed to DevSecOps, which is more of a role where I'm taking security and I'm building it into the carpenter group, and I'm building it into the plumbing group, and I'm building it into the electrical group, but they all may do it differently, right? This is one unified way to do it from the beginning and make sure it's done consistently throughout. So there are a couple of different ways, or a couple of different implementation models that companies may want to look at for planned SecOps. And the first way that we see the companies want to do is do it yourself. And that sounds great, but in the current environment, especially now with a very tight labor market, there are multiple millions of security jobs right now that remain unfulfilled. There are multiple millions of software development jobs that remain unfulfilled. In this environment, it's really hard to do this. And so the problem there is kind of threefold. First, you have to find these people. Second, you have to be able to lure them from their existing job, because it's very highly unlikely that they're unemployed. So you have to hire them away from their own companies, their existing companies, which can be expensive. And then you have to retain them. And this is the biggest problem that we're seeing companies have, is even if they can find and hire them away from their existing company, then they see another company do the same thing to them and hire these people away for yet something else. And so they end up being on this hamster wheel, where I'm just constantly trying to find, hire, and retain these people. And I'm just in a recruiting cycle where I'm constantly looking for these people and nothing's getting done, right? But if I can find these people, the next thing I do is I do an audit to assess their current security infrastructure and determine basically what architectural plans I need to buy in, right? What do I need to lay out, and what needs to be built into the overall segment. And then I need to take that to someone with authority in order to drive it within the organization. And typically in these decentralized organizations, then I need CISO buy-in. So I'm taking this to the CISO, I'm showing the architectural plans, and I'm using that then to sell the value of a planned SecOps model and get that in place. And then once I've gotten that buy-in, then I want to build and plan a change management system to basically take the organization from a very decentralized view and a very decentralized software development model to a decentralized model with a security framework or a planned SecOps architecture that gives it a framework to be much more secure in the way that it goes after growth and innovation. Now, the other way that you can do this, and this is the way that we recommend, is finding a good security technology partner. Someone who's got experience developing security software and can eliminate this hamster wheel, right? It can improve time to market. It can accelerate your jump moving forward to planning and building change management. It can give you options for ongoing support, and it gets you out of this problem of finding, hiring, and retaining people that are very difficult to find and almost impossible to retain. It gives you this option to be able to take that now and go to a security partner who already has these people, is using these people across multiple software developments. You get all of that experience across multiple companies for you. And then at the end of the project, you can use a smaller subset for ongoing support, but you don't have the problems of continuing to have to maintain and keep these people happy and keep these people hired, because that's a very difficult job. So that's my overall talk on DevSecOps moving to planned SecOps in this type of a decentralized environment. And I'll be happy to take any questions or questions for the Q&A session in the next session. Thank you for your time.
This is Techstrong TV.
I'm Bonnie Schneider for Techstrong TV. Well, joining me now is Jasmeet Singh. Jasmeet is the Executive Vice President and Global Head of Manufacturing at Infosys. Thank you so much, Jasmeet, for joining us.
Bonnie, it's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in driving digital transformation initiatives in the manufacturing sector?
Sure, thank you. So, Bonnie, first, let me just introduce the company. So, Infosys is a global next generation digital and consulting services company. Our purpose is to amplify human potential and create the next opportunity for people, businesses, and communities. We are over 350,000 people strong. And in manufacturing, we do a whole host of services for our clients, specifically around sustainability, and it permeates every part of the business that we do with our clients in this sector. It is really in terms of three spaces that I would say. One is in the measurement and compliance area. The other is in terms of running processes more efficiently and in a more cleaner way. And the third is in terms of just the product, the circular economy, the transformation that we can bring about in the product space.
That's really interesting, especially the move towards sustainability. I'd like to talk a little bit about the acquisition of Fluido and how it's influenced the approach to sustainability, specifically in ESG and in the tech industry.
Well, it's not necessarily only about Fluido. Fluido is a Salesforce-based competency it's a phenomenal company with a great culture. It's Nordics headquartered, and they provide, like I said, Salesforce services to our clients. But overall, the services that we provide, like I said, cover the three towers in terms of the measurement and compliance. And what that means is the carbon footprint, reporting analytics around those areas. In the efficient operations is really the green IT that we run. And this is where somebody like a Fluido will also come in terms of just looking at the processes and how they can be run more efficiently, particularly if they have Salesforce as a product environment. And the third, like I said, is really in terms of the product, right? So material substitution, how can you extend the life of the product? How can you remanufacture stuff? So those are the things that we do in the product footprint. And this is really across the board. It's not necessarily only Fluido.
I see. The recent ESG radar report, I'd like to kind of dive into that. If you can explain what it is and what are some of the key findings with that.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely, Bonnie. So we are incredibly excited about the report that we took out on ESG radar. We surveyed about 2,500 plus executives, senior executives, people who are involved in the sustainability space. And this was a global survey that we did across industries. And some great insights that came out. And by the way, it was on ESG, and we have an ESG 2030 vision in the company itself. But let me talk specifically around the survey. The things that I would say or the key takeaways were, one, ESG is actually a money maker. So it's not necessarily a cost, right? And there were actually data points that proved that from the survey. We had a very, very strong correlation out there. So 9 out of the 10 survey respondents actually said that they get, there is profitability behind their ESG initiatives, right? 10%, the remaining 10% actually said that their initiatives broke even. And actually nobody said that, look, it wasn't something that was profitable. The second thing was that overlooking the social and the governance aspects really hurts profits, right? So this was the other key finding that we had. And the third thing was that companies are focusing on possibly the most obvious ESG efforts, but not always on what's best for them financially. So these were the three kind of takeaways, and we can talk more about it. But like I said, it was a global survey. It has some key findings, and really we were very, very pleased about the reception that it got, and really furthers ESG overall beyond sustainability as well.
Was there anything in the report that surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, one aspect that I would say is, in the supply chain area, for example, everybody knows that in terms of scope 3 and really going after the supply chain is important. Everybody recognizes that. Two things that jumped out. One was people were not necessarily sharing the data across their entire supply chain, really actually having the conversation and measuring the supply chain to deliver to the goals that they had set out itself. So that was another thing that kind of surprised us. The other thing I would say is, and this is more in terms of, again, the governance aspect of it. One of the things that came across was if companies had a CSO, the Chief Sustainability Officer, a Chief Diversity Officer, if they had an ESG committee that reported into the board, and they had actually a Chief Sustainability Officer that actually was responsible for and had the power to actually do capital expenditures, if all those four things were there, it actually drove profit growth, all right? If you take one of those things, for example, it meant that you would actually falter there, right? So we did not find that correlation. So very, very interesting insights, and I would strongly urge the readers to really take a look at that.
That does sound very insightful. Most of our audience, a lot of them are people that work in the DevOps field, DevSecOps as well. I was wondering if you could share regarding this report, how the findings might help the decision-making process for these teams.
Well, two things that actually came out in the report. One was the focus on employees overall when you're looking at ESG efforts. So that permeates across the entire organization. That was a very, very strong recommendation that we have. That will further various aspects, whether it is the retention of talent, whether it is actually attracting talent as well. So that was one of the things that kind of got across the entire organization that was there from an employee perspective. The other thing was just in terms of while we are making progress in terms of actually leadership, CXOs in the companies, having actually metrics and goals and compensation tied to ESG efforts as well. And that's something that, again, is work in progress. We see a lot of ESG committees at the board now, more so, which is a great step in the right direction. It still has to permeate the entire ecosystem of the organization, and particularly the C-suite.
That's interesting. Can you speak a little bit about the role of cybersecurity at Infosys's approach to ESG? Where does cybersecurity fit into this, and what initiatives you have underway right now?
Well, that's extremely important, particularly for a company which is in our business. We service, the who's who of clients across sectors. And so cybersecurity is really central to what we do. We want to be able to, and this kind of ties into our governance tower, but we have secure by design. So everything that we build, it needs to be kind of permeating in terms of having security completely overlay all activities. We have privacy by design as well. So again, all these practices, and we have been recognized for this, should be embedded into everything that we do, and every Infosian, as we like to call ourselves, every Infosian does. And then we also actually consult with our clients. We take these practices, and of course, because clients need to trust what we do, need to be comfortable in terms of the security of their data, the security of the infrastructure that we support for them, all of these things go a long way in terms of being able to service our clients better.
That is true. Practicing what you do is very important. And on that note, what is Infosys doing right now to ensure that its own operations are sustainable and have a minimal impact on the environment?
Yeah, Bonnie, this is something actually, what people may not know is we actually made a commitment in 2011 to become carbon neutral. And actually 2020, we are carbon neutral. And I talked about our ESG vision, the 2030, and we're making great progress around that. The areas that we've been focusing, particularly from a sustainability standpoint, are around climate change, around waste, around water, right? So 100% of the water is recycled within Infosys, right? We have renewable energy. We have a 60 megawatt power plant as well within Infosys. So we have been making these, we have grown very, very well, but we want to actually lower the footprint, and we have made great strides around this area as well. And including in talent, for example, in the social aspect, we have made a commitment in terms of digital talent, reskilling talent, providing education. And we made a commitment about, to train digitally students, teachers, our clients, our personnel, more than 10 million, right? So we have made, again, great progress. Actually, since last year, we already did 4.8. So we are well on our way to actually make this a reality. So there are certain practices that we have got. We have our own lakes where, water is, for example, retained. In waste, I talked about, our focus has been on mixed waste. And so 78% we have been able to actually divert from landfills. So extremely proud of our sustainability practices. We are on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. We are on the REI 100. We are signatories to the, and we have won, an award from the United Nations on climate change as well in 2019.
Thank you. Those are really good examples to kind of visualize where Infosys sits in that space. I want to talk about software engineers, for example. What kind of training and support does Infosys provide to help people in that field incorporate sustainability into their work?
Yeah, so talent and learnability is a quality that actually in Infosys we talk about a lot. And a few years ago, fortuitous for us, actually prior to the pandemic, we made a significant push to have a digital first learning platform ourselves, right? So, we believe that any platform should have 5 elements, or any learning that we impart to our employees, and similarly for clients as well, should have 5 elements. It needs to be immersive. It needs to be adaptive. That means personalized, right? And it's in the age of in the age of TikToks and etc., it needs to be nano sized, right? So bite-sized learning when you want to do it. We all know you learn better when you have coaches. So it needs to be augmented, even if it is virtual augmentation, right? So, and the content, the collaboration, those are the 5 elements that we drive when we look at learning overall. And sustainability practices, I think, actually are embedded into everything that we do for our employees as well, and when we train them. First of all, it is actually making it transparent in terms of their footprint. What can they do themselves, right? And
Right.
so there's a lot of hackathons that we run around this. How can we make, and what they see themselves in our campuses, in the work that they do, in the work that they do with their clients, the ideas should bubble up and say, okay, look, how can we actually do this better? And we extend that to our clients as well, including our learning platforms, as well as the sustainability practices that we have.
That's interesting. Do you find throughout your career you're seeing a stronger interest in these sustainability practices and being more transparent as to how you can use them, how people can use them using Infosys? It seems to me that there is just a growing interest in this area.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would call it this a journey, but as part of our ESG commitment, we have also made a commitment that we will actually take our practices and help clients, not only our own services, et cetera, and everything that we do, but also actually help our clients. And there are numerous examples. So I'll give you just a couple. I mean, if I were to take just aerospace, the aerospace sector, which is part of my portfolio. I mean, even if it is the engine and the turbine efficiency, the movement to, actually enabling hydrogen, for example, usage in as a fuel, all these things we are driving, for example, for some of our clients. We also work with aerostructures, the people who make actually the frames themselves. And that, if we actually make the frames lighter, everything that we do there makes a significant difference, not only to the profitability of the companies, but also is a much more sustainable for them. The extension of the life of the products, for example, so that's another area where we can help them. And then just from a practices perspective, I mean, smart spaces as an example, we actually came out with an offering just because of the practices that we have. Even I talked about the digital learning, we came out as an offering so that we can take it to clients, because when clients see what we have done internally, they want more of that Kool-Aid, right? So, and you already have something. So we have been actually taking that across our clients, across sectors, taking some of these practices. And it's very, very meaningful for us. And, it's embedded in our purpose, right? So like I said, it's to amplify human potential and create the next opportunity for people, businesses, and communities. And we want to actually straddle all those 3 areas.
Jasmeet Singh, Executive Vice President and Global Head of Manufacturing at Infosys. Thank you so much for joining me, and I appreciate the examples and the insight that you've provided in this interview.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Bonnie.
Great. Well, that was Jasmeet Singh. We're going to be right back with Techstrong TV. I'm Bonnie Schneider, and we'll have more after this.
But sexual harassment is endemic in the bureau. I had one client. It made New York Post. She was in Newark, actually. She was in Newark. You know what? The rapist. She was actually one of the victims of the rapist.
Oh wow!
So she goes to headquarters to flee from the guy, and she goes to Vegas, and she's feeling bad. So she goes to employees assistance, EAP, employees assistance program counselor. Mm-hmm. The guy sends her, the EAP guy, who's a supervisor, sends her a dick pic. This is not the rapist. This is the other guy. It's a photo of a candy-colored dildo. Now it's actually in the New York Post. If you can fact check me on this, it's in the New York Post. And so you have this guy doing sending her this. They left him in place. And in fact, 2 weeks after this happened, they threatened to OPR her. OPR means Office of Professional Responsibility, getting punished. They threatened to send her for administrative punishment for not being professional, and they gave him an award for professionalism.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you. It's actually an indictment. They say, or not a complaint. I wrote the complaint. I'm like, I'm like, you can't make this stuff up.
That's crazy.
It doesn't. And why would you treat people? You're trying to get women in the FBI. Why would you treat them like that?
So who does the checks and balances for the FBI?
There are no checks and balances.
That's the problem.
Yes, there is an OIG, but the OIG, only time the OIG really gets involved is if it's a whistleblower complaint, and it has to go through a process. It's 5 to 7 years it'll take to come out of it.
Yeah, and those people who don't know what OIG is, Office of the Inspector General.
Yes. Now most departments have an OIG that oversees the whole department.
Right.
The FBI only has it for one particular purpose. Here's you would think. By 2012, they already knew I was a kind of a dangerous guy for the Bureau. There was just no doubts about that. But They actually put me into internal affairs, what they call now internal affairs. So they gave me internal affairs, and my son's behind me. I apologize.
That's good.
And they put me in internal affairs and taught me how everything worked. Oh my God, it's awful.
They armed you. Yeah.
Yes, but no one gets. The bosses don't get in trouble.
Right.
The bosses all get. In order for a boss to get in trouble, the punishment has to be over 14 days. So if they punish him for 13 days of suspension, he doesn't serve the suspension. He or she doesn't serve it. So that's what they do. They set it up, and here's why. Because theoretically, the reason is because if you do less than 14 days, it's like taking a vacation.
Right.
And it's like taking a vacation, and you still get the same pay. That being said, they should remove them from the job.
Right.
Once you get punished, because all agents can only be until you're 57. Now they're hiring these guys, and they are turning them into contractors so they can stay longer than 57. You don't want anybody in the FBI staying longer than 57. I promise you.
Cow.
Yeah, so they're working around this by hiring people back as contractors and giving them extensions. Give extensions to GS-13s who are senior agents. Don't give them to SESers or executives. The other thing about the FBI is there are no political appointees except for the director.
Right.
The director gets to spend 10 years. But the whole thing is everything's within the FBI. It is like going to some inbred camp that's been around for 100 years in the desert. That's the problem. The executives all know each other. It's a protection system.
Sounds like Scientology is what it sounds like.
Now why you insulted Scientology?
Right.
No, because the Scientology, they don't have as many guns. Scientology doesn't have the power that the FBI has.
That brings me to another question. So the IRS is hiring something like, I can't remember how many thousands of new agents, IRS agents, and arming them. Did you hear about that as well?
IRS has two types of what I would call agents.
Uh-huh.
They have the armed version and they have the unarmed version. Now I want to tell you something. I want to tell you a secret about the armed version. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
IRS agents that are armed are allergic to tax cases.
Really?
They don't do it. Yes. They don't want to do
organized crime or racketeering.
Yes, and or money laundering. They don't want to have anything to do with tax cases. So if they hire 50,000 that are armed, the country's not going to have a single extra tax case. The best people I worked with were IRS agents on OC cases, on organized crime cases, because of that. They'll work really hard. They just will not do a tax case to save their life.
Yeah, I was curious about that because when I heard about that, I was like, they have to be racketeering and organized crime specific agents.
They're not. They're supposed to be doing. What they're supposed to be doing is you bring in an IRS agent, and they're supposed to look at the tax issues and do the tax aspects of the case. I spent 24 years I used IRS agents all the time. Never had a single tax issue come up with them. They never even mention it. In fact, you wouldn't know. They actually are task force. They're usually in our task forces, and they say, "I'm with the IRS. I'm with the IRS." Because they don't want to get, not because they're embarrassed by the IRS, because they don't want to do tax cases.
Right.
And they're really good. Let's compare that to postal inspectors. Postal inspectors will, in fact, do postal cases.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go online and you can watch where if you watch those First Amendment auditors that come and they like show video, they take out a video camera in a post office or police station, and the cops come and they harass them type of thing. Videotaping people in public is legal. Videotaping cops is constitutionally protected. But you'll see the postal employees, if you go to a post office and you take out a video camera, they'll call a postal inspector and they will come and they will most likely tell you, oh, he's allowed to film. It's public. It's federal property. It's public, and they know the rules. A lot of the police officers don't, but those guys do know the rules, and it's legal to film in there. It's actually on the board. So I have the highest respect, but they will do you mess with the post, you will find some wrath going on there with the postal inspectors. You don't want to mess with them. IRS, commit all the tax fraud you want. Don't worry about it. Racketeering, you're a dead man, because the IRS will do all the books for you. They'll do it for the agents. FBI, they will do every single spreadsheet will be done by the IRS, and they'll all be perfect.
So people were freaking out when they heard about the IRS hiring all these armed agents. It shouldn't be citizens who are worried. It should be organized crime and the crime families in New York that are worried.
Yeah, well, yes, but my guess is there's not that many. I don't think there's 2,000 or 3,000 armed agents. They're going to hire auditors. There's another term. Sit there and do tax cases all day long. They'll never leave their desk. What they do is they do dialing for dollars.
Right.
So they'll call you up, say, hey,
threatening.
You got a problem, let's work out a deal. And if you talk to them up front, they get rated how many cases they settle. So if you could settle with them up front, but not too early, but early enough that you don't get out of their hands, you probably will get the best deal you can. And they're good. They're good people. I had a lot of luck with them because if there's charges to be made, it may be better to have a tax charge against somebody than another charge, and so that it's because it's administrative. Really,
and that's negotiable too.
Yes, and so rather than getting some charge that may affect someone's life, I did one of my whistleblower cases, and it turned out went really far south because I'm a very, very gentle lawyer. I always grant continuances. I always ask, agree to things that the government wants because it's just decency. They don't do the same to me. But I had one case that went south, and then I went to town on them. Baseball bat in the back in the woodshed. I really beat the living daylights out of them. And then almost 2 months to the day, I got a refund for this is last year. I got a refund for 2015 taxes.
Oh, wow.
Now, what are the chances that was a coincidence that someone called up the IRS and said, can you audit him for the last 10 years? Right. And they gave me a $2,600 refund.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Or they could lock me up. We locked the guy up for, $400 of tax fraud, that criminal, whatever, just to harass the people. And I said, that's not fair. Right. That's stuff that should not ever happen in the FBI. And do I think it happened? Absolutely. All it takes is a phone call. It's not a big conspiracy. I always laugh when people tell me it's a conspiracy. Wait, conspiracy is an agreement between two people to do something that may be try to stick someone or illegal. Yeah, it's a conspiracy. We do them all the time. Right. I conspire with my wife against my kids all the
Constantly.
time. Yeah, that's what marriage is about with kids. But okay, so let's go to now. We go to Twitter. Twitter was a problem. So look at Mar-a-Lago. Trump had classified material at Mar-a-Lago, right? Maybe. Right. Let's, for the sake of argument.
But how many presidents could be or would be guilty of the same thing?
Well, wait. Let's compare. Let's not. Why don't we compare him to the executives on the 7th floor?
Oh, true.
We have to go back to the presidents,
right?
Okay, how many of those documents were leaking? Were transmitting outside that safe?
Exactly.
I mean, if you're going to charge the president for doing this, and you're not going to charge your two senior executives
for carrying cell phones in a skiff, right?
Well, that's what do you think's more dangerous?
Absolutely. I would worry about the skip, not the president.
I know. Yeah, if he had I always laugh with the 100+ pages of documents. I have to. I mean, there have been plenty of executives who have walked out with. There's actually a way. There's actually a way of transporting classified material, and it's.
Right.
But they have been left in bathrooms. They have been left on trains. They've been stolen. Malfeasance. I think they had an FBI agent in Kansas City who was charged with. She was like hoarding records from the FBI. She literally was taking all kinds of records home and just stacking them. She wasn't giving them to anybody. She was literally she was just a hoarder. I mean, literally. And she went to jail. I think she went to jail or she got convicted, but she had tons of them. And if I look at the threat, I think the threat posed by Director Wray and his staff is significantly higher than the threat posed by Trump.
Right.
I think if Trump, but again, here's not where they're going to get him. It's classified material that may or may not work on a jury. It's the 1001, the false statement against the federal agents or to the federal prosecutors.
Right.
That's where they'll get them. Because that's easy enough to prove. Oh, they lied to us.
Right.
And this is why 10 years ago I would say talk to an agent, but now and I'm not the only agent who's saying this, is you really need to have an audio or video, a tape of the conversation and or a lawyer passing the information along, because if you said, the sky's blue outside as part of investigation and it wasn't, it was more cloudy, that's a false statement, you're chargeable.
Right.
And sometimes it's nuanced, and they charge people with that, and that, by the way, is a felony.
They were talking about that when I signed the OIA, when I was working as an informant, and they really emphasized the fact of, if you say anything that might be untrue during this operation, we can come back years later and get you for lying to a federal officer. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that, but why are you focusing so much on that piece of the pie? Well, they do that.
Yeah. But but they're telling you up front. What they're doing is they're scaring you to make sure you tell the truth.
Right.
And honestly, that's a good idea. That way you're not going to, because I don't care if you tell me bad information. Hey, by the way, got some bad news. He's innocent.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, I don't want people to make stuff up for me in the FBI.
Right.
So do they charge a lot of sources for that? No. They do on the drug arena, because drugs is where people lie, cheat, and steal. Right. Every informant informant. I use the word informant only when it relates to drugs and those transactional, because they are true informants. The rest of the people are really human sources.
Right.
Because you could be a source for anything. If in your building, the informants are only used for particular items and nothing else, because they can't be used for anything else.
Right.
That's a big difference. But I mean, the fact that they're scaring you to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, good. That's where you want to be, and you want to tell the FBI. Then you want to tell the FBI agents, okay, but if you lie to me, what happens?
Exactly. They always told me it's a two-way street, and it's a relationship. And I was like, this street only has one lane. It only goes one way.
The bus goes one way. That's right. Yeah. That they're allowed to. Law enforcement is allowed to test veracity by providing false statements. You see my son in the background. They're allowed. They do that. There's a reason to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's gotten out of hand to some degree if agents are lying about everything. Mm. Now that's where we come to the Trump stuff, because I don't. One is the president of the United States for something like this probably should never do it. Time. I think the president. If I was Biden, I would give him. I would just let him go. Just give him, give immunity. Give him whatever paper it is to say goodbye. Why does it matter? The man. Everyone's gonna know what happened.
Right.
If you prosecute him, he may come back and be a good candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Why test that? And you don't gain the U.S. gains nothing from it except a lot of vitriolic feelings. Now I have a harp playing. Please don't play the harp here. Thank you.
To me, it seemed more like the Salem witch trials. It was like they were trying to find anything and everything, and they just latched on to that classified material. But I mean, coming from the intelligence community and knowing that there's been classified documents and whole envelopes left at bus stops.
Yes.
Before,
Yes.
and we're going to try to get this guy for classified information because he's a president. Forget about all the other stuff, all the other informants you've put, in danger because you've left files just sitting around. But we're going to go after the president.
I'm not upset about that. I'm upset about Trump that he killed Soleimani or ordered the hit on Soleimani. Not that he had a bunch of shit in his. I mean, it's the whole idea. He left it in a room, and people can look at it, but it's really the documents. They're problematic. If he had a reason to have them, then I would want to know what those reasons are, why he kept stuff. I mean, I would want to have, and I would probably say, if you DOJ explain to me, we'll give you a non-pros if you explain why you took all this stuff, so we understand why this stuff was valuable. No, the greatest documents in the world are beautiful. They belong in Trump Palace. But why did you take these? What did they give you? That would be more important, because that's what they do for people that are spies. They give them breaks if they disclose what happened, and it allowed us to do a damage assessment.
Damage control. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The damage assessment's huge. That way, and plus to look at it and say, is anything missing?
And he may turn around and tell them, look, I took the papers because I knew this was going to happen.
Yes. That's the problem. Is that the best defense is, hey, by the way, the FBI is corrupt. That they're out to get me, so I needed these as leverage. How do you? That's outrageous. Best one. If you go down to Miami, the former SAC down in Miami had to resign, and then there were allegations that he was giving a quid pro quo or something short of that to a person that was like the sheriff, because the sheriff was African American and he wanted to be the first person to arrest an African American. And I'm not sure, for all that, what that is. I understand the thought process on that. It may not be a quid pro quo. It's like, look, you finally have one African American there, and okay, the guy screwed up.
Right.
Do I necessarily want to charge him, but that's a discussion you have with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Right.
And then you bring the guy in and you tell him, look, this is the problem. You need to fix this. There's actually civil ways of fixing things.
When you're in a serious situation, when you walk into the U.S. Attorney's Office and Department of Justice sitting there with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Secret Service, that's when you know shit's about to hit the fan.
Yeah. Well, no, you do with that. You walk over and you sit right next to the U.S. Attorney. You sit down right next to him, and then you understand about how afraid you are. And then you look at him, you look at their papers. So that's the technique you use. Have no boundaries. It goes, where are you going? Or you sit at the head of the table. You don't sit. Never sit across the room. Always sit right next to him, because that just drives them nuts. And then ask your attorney to sit on the other side. And then look at him and say, how you doing? I'm so happy to meet you.
Yeah, I think at my table I had the U.S. Attorney, the head of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Houston to my left, and then my lawyer immediately to my right. So it was like I could see the paperwork there and I could see the paperwork here. But then you had Department of Justice and a bunch of other people in the room
all
too.
Around.
Yeah,
that's a nightmare.
Yeah,
that's when every seat in the room is taken by the other side. You're lucky you're walking out of there with your head. I mean, really, there's no good that comes from that.
No.
Like, you look at your lawyer, and your lawyer is looking awfully small, right? You look at him; he doesn't look that big. Everybody else have big heads in there, and they're all looking pretty tough. And your lawyer is looking well.
I think what saved me though is my lawyer was David Adler, the former CIA agent that got the guy out of prison that I guess got arrested for selling explosives to Libya during that whole arms scandal.
Yes.
So they arrested him and put him in prison, and then my lawyer got him out because he still had a clearance with CIA and at Langley, and was able to get all the information and show it to the judge that, hey, he was working for CIA. So, I mean, he was a great lawyer. But what I found interesting was when we hit the elevator after the meeting with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office handed him a folder of images to analyze because he still works for the U.S. Attorney's Office as a consultant.
Yeah.
So I thought, I got a pretty good, good lawyer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Everyone needs a part-time job, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yes. So there are clearly insiders,
right,
inside the government, and Trump is an outsider,
right.
So that is Trump's problem.
Do you think it'll damage his ability to run effectively in 2024?
I don't think he will.
You don't think so?
No, I hate to say it. I think that a lot of the stuff he's doing right now. I mean, did you see the baseball cards?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's your big announcement. Oh my God. I mean, the baseball cards you can launder money with. I mean,
right.
And meanwhile, Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies are going down, turning into garbage, and he's pushing another form of non-fungible stuff.
NFTs.
Yeah, I mean that's what money laundering is made of. I mean, is that type of non-fungible stuff.
Oh, for sure.
So what do I think? I think you're only doing that if you're looking for money. Hey, he's a president. I mean, Billy Carter made a lot of money on his Billy Bear and other stuff, and you're allowed to profit. I mean, I think Obama has done fairly well since he's come out. I saw his house. It's like, wow, you are doing very well on Nantucket, or not Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so what do I? So I can't hold that against the presidents because they're allowed to have a life.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't get a ton of money after they leave the presidency.
No, I think they get their salary, right?
It's like $200,000 or $500,000 or something for the rest of their lives. But
that's the presidential salary,
right? And that's not much when you put it in perspective with CEOs and like big tech and stuff like that.
That's a lot of money.
well, yeah, for you and I, but not for like Bezos or other CEOs of companies. Right.
Oh yeah. Well, I was going to tell you we got to go back to the FBI. So the best video you can watch is the director of the FBI getting laid into over his airplane. Did you watch that one?
I heard about that.
Oh, it's wonderful because the FBI director he left a congressional hearing. Because he had to catch a plane, but it was actually an FBI plane, a G5 was a Citation G5 that was waiting for him so he can go on vacation. So that's what he was doing, and forgot to tell the senator that, oh yeah, I'm waiting for my personal government jet to fly me. Now he responded by saying, well, I have to pay for those flights. I'm required by taking them. So he's required by FBI policy to have his plane. If I'm the director of FBI, I want that policy too. Yes, I got yes. I have to pay. He has to pay the flight. I guess someone looked at the flight. It would cost him $120 to take because he has to pay at coach rate, not at the citation rate, at a coach rate. Wow. And it gets worse. So he left a statutory oversight meeting to go on vacation. Forgot to tell him he was going on vacation. Told him he has to leave. And then there's a protected disclosure by pilots to Congress. This is wonderful. Congress has already leaked this. I know Congress is like they leak everything. It's terrible. We only can hope they clamp it down. I was hoping they were going to be like an iron bear trap, but that's just not what they are. But the pilots made a disclosure that Ray doesn't like the commute to where his airplane is held at some secret spot, which is about 30 minutes or 45 minutes from where he works in traffic. A little more in traffic. So he has his airplane flown from, now you have Quantico, you have places around that have government aircraft, from his airfield that's very close to Reagan National. So he can go, and it costs $1,000 or more to land an airplane at Reagan National.
Right.
So he lands it there, so he doesn't have to do the commute because he really doesn't like doing commuting. So that's how powerful he is. That he needs to miss the commute. Now he's got 3 or 4 cars that are following him, and they got lights on him because he's running off the side with the lights going on, so he can. But even that, that's, if I was a director, I'd be like, no, man, I don't want to have the lights chasing people away. I look like a jerk. I want to just fly over Reagan and then pay the extra $1,000 or $2,000 and then fly.
Right.
That's waste, fraud, and abuse. That's all that is.
Right.
It just. I mean, and the fact that he would think like that says he's out of touch with what agents do. Now, I was in the Middle East, and I needed a flight. To go from the Middle East to the United States with one stop.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't get a G5 to fly it, which caused me a lot of problems because what was being flown was not anything that you would want to fly in any other place.
Right.
I'm as an agent on the ground. I'm the one suffering because they can't use the G5. I want behavioral analysis to fly around in the G5. I want the SWAT team, the HRT, to fly around there. I don't want the director. The director is not that important. I mean, you think the director is making some life-changing minute-by-minute decision? No, you have a bunch. He can use a cell phone.
He's a political pawn, basically.
Yeah, he's a political king, but he could do it he could do it anywhere. And he doesn't need to fly back there. He could literally he has bosses in every field office that can run things. He doesn't fly to a field office and take charge. He has enough communication wherever he goes, including any of his permanent residences, that he could just do it from there. This is 2022 going on 23, and he doesn't need to fly that jet.
No.
But he's doing it because he can, and he made the policy. Him and with the concurrence of DOJ made the policy. And my guess is because there's probably two jets, and I'm guessing that the AG now they used to share a jet. And they used to share a jet, and this was their fight between the Attorney General and the FBI director. Have nothing better to do than fight about who's driving the bicycle. Yeah, about the bicycle. That's right. They're two kids fighting over a bicycle, and so they used to have. This is Mueller's problem. The DOJ guy wants to use the airplane again. You mean the DOJ guy, the Attorney General? Yeah, well, he doesn't get to use it. I want to use it. Tell him go pound sand. Now, honestly, I actually think that the DOJ guy would actually be more important to fly around than the FBI guy, because the DOJ has a lot of different elements that would require that. Whereas the FBI has central location, they have their own command, they have their own communication.
Regional
he can sit in his office. Yes, he could take a flight. And by the way, if he wants, he probably can carry a gun.
Yeah, commercial too.
Yeah, and he has a whole hostage rescue team, a protection detail.
Yeah.
And Louis Freeh would take a train back to Connecticut and New York when he would go. I don't see why Ray can't do that. I think it's a disgrace. If that protected disclosure is true, and I have no reason to doubt that it is, because it's coming from pilots. He should. We already had one director that was forced to step down because of that type of political graft. So so Ray needs to go.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And I think that we're going to see a lot more coming out of this as time progresses. But I worry about 2024 because I think that with the FBI running unchecked and, all the turmoil that we've gone through over the past 10 years, 2024 is going to be a nightmare, I think.
Well, here's the good part about this. There is one check in there, and it's the agents. Right. And here's why. Because if you've dealt with enough of them, just because you tell an agent what to do doesn't necessarily mean he does it.
Right.
That's how pathetic this is. That the check, the balance in the check is at the agent level when they tell somebody not to do something, and then that agent said they tell them do this, and they're like, yeah, okay.
Sure.
In Salt Lake City. We have one protected disclosure that went to Congress and has gone all around Congress, where DOJ sent an affidavit for a search warrant to a squad in Salt Lake City, and the supervisor of the squad gave it to two senior agents. They looked at it. They said this isn't right. They did the draft again, sent it back. They sent it back a few times, and the agent said that it doesn't really portray the group like we think it should portray them, and they removed the supervisor because he refused to order the agents to sign the affidavit. That's the kind of agents you need in the FBI.
Yeah.
That is your real FBI agent. The guy who got removed, he called me up. He got sent to the FBI's electric chair, which is located and CJIS, which is the Criminal Justice Information Center in West Virginia, which is where all good agents go to die. Because if you go there, if you get a temporary duty there, you're never coming out. Now, just funny enough that he goes there, and then I get this great story from about another SAC who's in another field office who decided he's going to handle the racial stuff like he should. So he puts out to his supervisors, I'm done with all this racial issues. From now on, no one's getting promoted in this office unless they're African American.
Oh my gosh.
So since my client's in the electric chair, they can't actually move this guy over there and get killed off. So they had to move him somewhere else. And you're like, where did you get these guys from?
That's crazy.
It doesn't take a lot to do this. That guy right there doesn't understand the job, so he needs to go. He needs to be put down. Right. He needs to be retrained, put down to a position, maybe one lower, and keep the same pay. Who cares? And just say, look, man, you're not cut out for it. Now, in New York, they used to have something called the rubber room. Mm. In New York, they had the rubber gun squad, and they had the rubber room. And the rubber gun squad was for agents that were just lost their minds. Now, in New York City, agents commute, a lot of them commute 100 miles each way or more. I commuted 90 miles each way every day. Wow. So 180 miles. And I was about to lose my mind and probably did several times. But other agents, I had one agent that was commuting from Massachusetts. And I would drive by it, and he would have rocket packs on his car going down because he was going 100 miles an hour both ways home because you have to. And he was on a SWAT team, so he was on the edge. Agents in New York sleep in the office. They will sleep in the office, but if you lose your mind in the FBI, you go to a rubber gun squad for a little while, which is a good thing to have. You get that cool blue gun. You could go do what you want, walk around for a few weeks or a few months, enjoy yourself. You still get paid, and then when you've recovered, you go back and no one cares because a lot of people go in the rubber gun squad. They also have the rubber room for supervisors, where someone's deemed to be a supervisor who has no business being a supervisor. So he's assigned to the rubber room. Where's the rubber? So he's put there for until he either resigns and or able to stay in the room so long that he's deemed worthy of coming out and taking another job. But in New York, that's what they kind of handle their own thing, their own issues. For good or bad, but they're not firing the people right away, because a lot of guys, after 10 or 15 years of driving 200 miles a day and being put through all kinds of garbage, they lose their minds. And so they just need a break, and they give it to them.
It totally makes sense. Well, Kurt.
Okay, we gave him too much time?
Yeah, it's been a pleasure having you on. We've been on for 2 hours. So
I'm sorry.
This will be a great episode for the listeners. So this should make up for the fact I haven't done an episode for the last couple of weeks. So this should be good. But I appreciate it, Kurt. And
it's an honor.
We're going to have to do another episode fairly quick, probably next month.
Perfect. Sure. Anytime. Awesome. It's an honor being here.
Awesome.
Thank you. Enjoy yourself. Bye-bye.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, the great pleasure of being joined by Kevin Mattias. Kevin is Chief Product Officer with Cherry. How you doing, Kevin?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Mitch.
Great to have you. First-time caller, first-time visitor, first-time Techstrong TV.
Yes, first time all things.
First time all things. Great to have you on, and excited to learn about Cherry. So as part of doing that, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about the company.
Sure. So I've been in real estate data and technology for about 7 years now. The space goes really wide, but I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about Cherry. I have been in product management for over 10 years now. I have been at Cherry for about 4.5. And Cherry is a data management platform for real estate. We help our clients who are large commercial real estate investors, insurance companies, and lenders connect their public, third party, and internal data so they can make better investment management and underwriting decisions. It's pretty specific niche in the real estate world, but real estate data is a mess. Real estate data is, even at its best, usually solidified in Excel sheets, manually stitched together. It comes from the public domain. It comes from internal systems. It comes from providers. So we have our work cut out for us in the space.
It's interesting. It's one of the questions that I had. Oftentimes, technology vendors are generally just a technology. They don't specialize in a particular, use case or industry or something like that. And while I've never worked in real estate, having bought a few homes and researched and paid a few mortgages, I can imagine. I mean, you talk about the public sources of data and all of that. So do you help people with aggregating that content together and then using it in some way, or is it a platform and then they put whatever they want on to Cherry and you make it easier to do analytics and whatever kind of applications they build around it?
Sure. It's a lot more of the latter. I mean, some of it is data aggregation, but our goal is to we want to take the heavy lift of pipeline building, data standardization, data modeling, and stitching data together off of the plates of our clients, right? If you think about our customer base, we want their focus to be on how do they make the best investment decisions, right? How do they automate their underwriting process to reduce their risk, right? So our goal is to help them stay focused on what they do in real estate and not have to worry about, say, digging through tax records from a county to figure out, what data is relevant for the property they're underwriting or investing in. We don't want them to have to worry about how do you stitch together lease comp data with sales comp data, with market trend data, right? There's all sorts of different data sets that help inform those decisions, and they don't really speak to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think people who have purchased a home or think about real estate, think about a property, and what we don't often think about is the fact that leases are not specific to a property. They're specific to a given floor in a given building. But if you think about a real estate transaction, it could be many buildings on many parcels of data, and the loan for those buildings is all grouped together. So there's a lot of entity resolution and data standardization that has to happen for data to be meaningful to our clients.
Very interesting. Yeah, I can just imagine the scenarios of, can I use it for this purpose? And what rights do I have to water, minerals, or whatever? And
sure.
What kind of businesses, how high can I build the building, right? If I want to extend it or whatever it might be. Okay, very good. Well, so let's step back for a minute. I can imagine, and I kind of get, at least from afar, the data management problem in the real estate business, whether you're in any one of those different company roles, is pretty monumental. And they can't all hire the best world-class data analysts to do all this well for them. So they need some help. We often talk about, we need a data strategy. It used to be who the data owner was, who owns this data, and that's sort of who you went to get the guidance about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we need to do. But I kind of get the sense of a lot of us don't really have a data strategy. We might say we do, but I'm not sure we really do. What do you define as a good data strategy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think even to build it into a little bit of the story, especially in the real estate industry, if you go back 10 years, there was a realization that data was going to be necessary in order to compete. So firms said, we need data, right? That was the light bulb that went off. And the data strategy at that point was very simply go and acquire data, right? It was data about demographics or data about market movement, right? It was all different kinds of data sets. And that was the strategy. Build a budget, go buy data. And that happened, right? People budgeted for it. They said, we're going to go buy data. And then it came to, what are we going to do with that data?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And all of a sudden, these companies realized, like, we bought the data, but we didn't necessarily include all of our end users. We didn't think about how that data was going to fit into their workflow, or how that data was going to get built into a process, or our master data model, right? A lot of that thinking didn't really happen. So when we think about a data strategy, especially at Cherry and in the real estate industry, it starts with your end users, right? And it starts with what types of products and workflows, reporting does that data need to go into to be meaningful, right? And add value. And that's, as you work back, it's obviously important to take that into account when selecting what data you are going to acquire, whether it's from the public domain or a private provider. And then some of the big things are really all about, now that you know the scope of your data, how are you going to keep it secure? How are you going to scale it as your needs change and the business needs change, right? How are you going to hire the right people to make sense of that data? How are you going to make sure it stays up if it's the quarterly reporting period end and one of your upstream data providers has decided to add or remove or change a field,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole data pipeline explodes? What are you going to do, right? How are you going to know that happened? How are you going to alert your team? How are you going to make sure that, the analysts who have been online all weekend aren't banging down the doors of the IT or the data department, saying, why is it all broken?
Well, I don't know that folks outside of the teams working on this realize, when we say integration, right, and we talk about connecting things together, it's a moving object, constantly changing, sort of like a cellular organism. Every cell is changing on its own path and time. And, hey, the API just changed. How did we know that? Well, they just did it. They didn't even send us an email. And now we got to go fix that. From security to all those integrations, it's an effort to keep up with that. And, the other thing you haven't mentioned yet, or maybe you did, was also just, where is our data, right?
Sure.
What is in what cloud? What are we pulling into a platform like yours? The currency of it, the relevancy of it. That's part of the whole thing too, because oftentimes you don't know where all that data is because it's being created, generated, especially in a world where storage is massively available. It's not quite free always, but you can store a lot of content, a lot of data.
Definitely. There's a reason that there are many B2B businesses out there who are strictly data lineage providers, right? Because everybody wants to know what changed, when did it change, who touched it last. And it all goes back to the point of, how does that impact your business process, right? And I think that's one of the biggest missing pieces, is monitoring and observability. Very simply, how do you know, if you rely on data that was manually entered into a system at a given point in time, and you need it in a report in the hands of executives at another point in time, what are all of the different transformations that happened to that data as it went through your process? And if something fails, how do you know, how do you react, and how do you triage that problem? And it's not a problem that can be solved just by technology either, right? A huge part of data strategy, especially if you're looking at build versus buy, is to just ask the right questions, right? I think a lot of people, if they're going and they're going to buy a technology that's going to interact with their data, they're not thinking necessarily, what is the incident response process if something fails?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big missing piece.
What do they call midnight before the quarterly report comes out, right? And says, "Oh, we got a problem."
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And it happens all the time. And it usually happens on a Saturday at 6 o'clock.
It only happens on weekends and after 9 p.m. So
exactly. Right? Exactly.
Rarely during normal hours. Yeah, I'm curious, it's great to talk to someone who's a data expert and working in this field. We talk about databases and where content is stored and whatever technology that might be. What do you see how do you define a data platform? What's that mean to you as someone in that part of the industry?
Sure. And I think it's an important question to ask, because oftentimes if you're speaking to someone who doesn't really have a fully baked data strategy, you say, what's your strategy for your data? And they go, well, we purchased Snowflake.
We're good.
Spectacular, done, right? We're finished. And I think that's, going back to my last point, it doesn't answer a lot of the questions, right? There are database technologies, there are orchestration technologies, there are technologies of how and when to run your code to make sure that data flows through your pipelines. There are telemetry, right? So how do you know when things are going wrong in your pipelines and get logs out to your users? There are data delivery, right? And API stitching technology. I mean, there's so many different technologies, but it's all about how you stitch them together to solve your business needs, right? One thing we see all the time is the evolution of, I know I need a bunch of data, so I purchased it, and then I purchased a database technology and I put all the data in it. But now what happens, right? And you think about what's needed to make data meaningful. And I talked a little bit about some of the challenges in real estate data, and that's especially where hiring people in product management, hiring data analysts, involving subject matter experts to understand how does that data stitch together, right, is a meaningful piece. And then that extends to data governance strategy, right? If you're dealing with, as often is true in real estate, financials information, right? The accounting team has made a change in the accounting system, and that needs to flow down into downstream reports. How do you manage those changes, right? What people should be allowed to make changes to the data, and at what points in the process should they be allowed to make those changes? Right.
It's interesting too, because not only the uses, but also the meaning of the data itself, right? What one source of data might call a customer might be a customer to you, or might be a customer, but we define it differently of who our customers are. So you can't just take, here's all these sources, map them into a nice data platform and put whatever, Tableau or whatever on top of it. And great, now start writing apps and reports, right? There's duplicate data. It has to be deduped and, correlated to decide out what's relevant and what to use, what not. It's a pretty complex problem when you really jump into it. At least to me, it's fascinating. But
absolutely. Well, and the point you just made is actually such a good one. You talk about client access and security. And I think a lot of times if you're a firm who's going to outsource, right, to a data platform, you say, are you SOC 2 compliant? And a lot of companies will say, well, we're on Google or AWS and they're SOC 2 compliant. And I think for a lot of customers who haven't gone through the process of thinking that through, those are not equivalent. SOC 2 compliance doesn't transfer from one company to another. And understanding who has access to your data is critical.
Vital. Yeah. Knowing where it is, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your data is and who's using it, right? To go back to it.
I'm going to start using that. I like that.
That our parents used to say, yeah, do you know where your kids are? Well, very good. This has been awesome. Enjoy talking with you about this. Where can folks find out more and start to work with some of the capabilities that you offer through Cherry?
Yeah, I would send everyone to cherry.com. If you're a developer, if you're a data analyst, if you're anyone who works with data in real estate, when you're in Cherry, you can take a look at our marketplace of third-party data providers. You can take a look at our API documentation. It's all free trial access. So go to cherry.com and sign up.
And with the sign up, assume you have a free account, you can start to do some of this. Let me try and make some connections, use some of these services, or at least imagine how it might go from my spreadsheets and my SQL databases to a data platform. Really targeted at real estate kinds of data.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Well, cherry.com, CHERRE.com.
You got it. Like the fruit.
Like the fruit, just to make sure everybody's on the same page there. Well, it's been fascinating talking with you, Kevin, and keep us up to date as things move along and new challenges pop up or new capabilities are coming out from Cherry. We'll talk to you again.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, Mitch. It was great.
You bet. Great to have you on. We'll see you again soon. So be sure and check out cherry.com, CHERRE, and Kevin, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you.
Thanks, Mitch.
Discover the cutting-edge insights of our new show, AI Times, a series that explores the limitless potential of artificial intelligence. Sponsored by the AI Infrastructure Alliance, the AI Times is at the forefront of the AI revolution, tackling the crucial questions of how we can leverage AI for the betterment of humanity. Stay ahead of the curve as this show delves into all things surrounding AI, including trends, pressing concerns, and the positive impact AI is making around the globe. AI Times.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with David Reber, who's the Chief Security Officer for NVIDIA. He's also head of product security. And we're talking about all things related to AI and cybersecurity. And I guess my first question to you, David, is A, welcome to the show, but B, we've been hearing almost constantly a stream about how ChatGPT and all these AI platforms will be the new bane of cybersecurity. And I guess I just want to know from you, what can we look forward to from AI and cybersecurity for the good guys?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. And looking at that, there's been a lot of discussions, as you mentioned, about the adversarial advantages that comes with ChatGPT. One of the things that I see coming with the future, and even here now, is that security is in the daily life of everything we do. Everybody in the company, the human always has been the weakest link in the equation. And one of the things as cyber defenders, we need to find better ways to do is get information into the hands of the people that are making decisions in real time. So when you have an admin or a developer configuring something, say on an S3 bucket, how can you get them real-time information of good decisions and bad decisions? So the technologies that enable the ability to say automation of writing malware and phishing campaigns can also be used defensively for how do I properly secure this? How do I make good decisions? How do I know this might be a phishing technique? That is one of those areas that we're really exploring, figuring out how do you enable that to the defenders, in addition to the standard cyber problems, which is more of a data problem in and of itself, which is how do we process these massive amounts of information and find the needle in the stack of needles when an adversary is in our network.
I think this comes to the heart of, we've been talking about now for, I don't know, the better part of 3 or 4 years about AI and cybersecurity. And some people are still gung-ho about it and others are a little more skeptical. And I think probably the truth is somewhere in the middle. But the question becomes, what is the current challenge? Because a lot of folks would say the AI that they see today really only works on some fairly rote stuff. So how do we get smarter?
So one of the challenges, I think, is it's a dichotomy, right? We need to let the machines do what the machines are good at and let the humans do what the humans are good at. And I think a lot of people, when we step into that cyber world or cyber product portfolio, we want the thing that just works. We want the one button click and it's going to find every malware ever, or find every rogue login into your network. And they want it to just work completely. So we quickly dismiss it as, oh, it doesn't work because it didn't find this one use case. What we're finding as we continue to look at as an industry is starting to figure out, well, can AI be able to take terabytes of information down to a handful of events that the human analyst can go additionally respond? We're also seeing it useful in whenever you have a known compromise, how can you find everywhere where they went on the network? Because you have more known knowns in those cases. And that's where you're starting to see it start to formulate and work better. In addition to being able to answer simple questions like, hey, how do I secure this, or write secure code? We're starting to see that progress. And I agree with you on that. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Right? The perfect AI is not there today, but at the same time, it is helping accelerate human capacity more than having nothing.
Will this get better because the processors are getting faster and they can look at the data and train the AI better? Or is it we're also getting better at training these models using less data, and we don't need as much data to necessarily come up with the right answer, and that's going to lead to more rapid advances?
So, I mean, naturally, more processing power is going to help, but I think it's more on the latter, is knowing what to train it on, how to train it, how to do it in unsupervised ways, and then where to apply it, and then getting the outputs in an explainable way to those that can take action. I think that last mile part is one of the cases that we struggle with as an industry, is how do you get that information that last mile to make it successfully used? Because it's not like a car where you'll know if it's successful or not real time. In the cyberspace, sometimes it's that information and getting it to people downstream to be able to make those changes.
Do we need to change our approach to cybersecurity to take advantage of all this? Because historically, we had a lot of workloads running on premise, and we still do. But frankly, I'm not sure we could collect enough data to really train AI models for an on-premise environment. So is it going to be easier to secure things in the cloud? Because we will be able to more easily aggregate the data, train the models, and kind of see what's happening across multiple accounts owned by multiple companies, and we can kind of circle the wagons better.
Whether it's cloud or on-prem, I think the coming together as a collective defense across organizations is the challenge we have to conquer together as an industry. The same adversaries will go after multiple companies. How do you enable that sharing and that training of information that may or may not have sensitive information about your competitor or your partner? So I think those relationships and the way to do information exchange with high bandwidth, a high fidelity that doesn't impede intellectual property protections is what's really going to be that next evolution. Cloud and on-prem is just how much compute do you have where, how much is it geographically dispersed, and data movement. Those are all technical challenges. That challenge is that inter-organization sharing so we can have a collective defense against industry adversaries.
Early on, there were a lot of folks who were like dismissive of AI and cybersecurity in particular. My skills are too good and no machine will ever be able to do that. And I think maybe we're coming to another mindset where people are going, I'm not sure I want to do this job without some help from AI because it's kind of stressful. And so, are people's minds starting to change and go, yeah, get me some more of this AI because this stuff is going to basically drive me around the bend.
Yeah, and I think what we're also seeing is as even the average enterprise, the tech stacks are becoming more and more complex for them to do their basic bookkeeping, their basics of just sustainment of that enterprise. So when it used to just be, I knew how to secure a Windows laptop with my Windows servers infrastructure and my networking equipment, that mindset could apply and could be successful. But now you add in layers and layers of open source and a complex supply chain, even for your most basic enterprises. You can't hire enough diverse skills to focus on that. That's where I see the promise in AI, and we're seeing the results in that, being able to elevate those critical and those high issues to the defender so they can process those mounds of information and make those decisions more rapidly, even in technologies domains they may not be the deep expert in. where your SOC analysts were before.
How do you see all this changing the relationship between the security teams and the rest of the organization? We've seen shift left, where there's more stuff going out to the developers who may or may not know what they're doing with various application code. And we've seen shift right, where we're using the IT team now to take over security operations. But as we throw AI in that mix, how do you think this might all play out?
I'm hopeful that it really starts helping go after that philosophy. I mean, the majority of security issues is just proper IT, proper operations, right? So a lot of security solutions are putting band-aids on bad asset management, or they're going after those areas where you're just weak in those foundational building blocks to run an enterprise network. So as we've gotten into DevOps, right, a lot of that automation has helped clean some of that up. And what I'm hopeful is that the AI, we can continue to find ways to then work smarter. I mean, CVEs are released every single day. It's hard for our developers to keep up. So how can you use that to prioritize the work in all of those open source projects, everything that you use within enterprise? So we're not just investing in patching just because there's a CVE, but patching in the ones that are actually exploitable and reducing the time to do that analysis. So when you look at that, it's both proactively getting that information when developers doing development, in addition to reactively when things come out. How do you help them prioritize the investments on what to go fix first, second, third?
Do you think we'll get to the point where I can just walk into the office and ask Alexa, hey, what are the 3 things that are likely to get me fired today, and which one should I fix first?
I hope. So, and that's where, when you look at ChatGPT or other things like that, like I'm a big believer, every offensive tool can be a defensive tool. So when we start looking at how can we train it for offensive techniques, we just got to look at the inverse, or use that as the way to identify where we have to invest in defensive investments. So hopefully the answer is yes. One day you can say, hey, what are the easiest ways into my network? And they'll be able to highlight those, or the top quickest ways into my network. Hopefully one day we'll be able to train that model bidirectionally in order to help prioritize for the defenders.
We live in uncertain economic times, and everybody's trying to figure out, does that mean we're going to reduce spending on security or increase spending on security? What's your sense of the business folks' appreciation for cybersecurity these days, and they're willing to fund it? Because historically, it's always been kind of like, security was a percentage point on a larger IT budget, and it never seemed to change, but maybe our minds are evolving.
I do think we're starting to see more regulations across the globe that are trying to put it in the boards, make it front and center. But that's more of a forcing function. I'm a big believer in looking at how do you make security less an insurance problem of how much do I want to invest based upon what I'm willing to take risk on, but more as that business enabler function. I think with especially AI, you're going to start seeing even more SaaS startups and cloud services come in, which security is paramount into the success of those businesses. You can also offer it as a security features for those companies. So hopefully what we'll start seeing as the AI takes on and we start becoming more prone to protecting of data in our data supply chains, you're going to see a bigger emphasis because data can move. And if the data is gone, the model's gone, you've just lost your intellectual property versus I just lost my cloud service. So hopefully we'll see that pivot more. I think what we'll also start seeing is a focus on, rather than 1,000 or hundreds of cyber tools, how do you get into a more narrower portfolio? So for the AI to be successful, it has to integrate with the things that the enterprises have. No longer will you be able to just have a whole plethora of solutions to go after the problem. You're going to see a decreased investment of a bigger portfolio tools is probably that shift that we'll see. And I mean, it's gone through in history that way as well.
Do you think the bad guys are discovering AI? I mean, have we inadvertently found ourselves in something that feels like an AI arms race?
I do. I do think that they're looking at how do they scale. I mean, the age-old challenge has been the attacker has to be right once, defenders have to be right every time. As an attacker, though, how can I scale to go after those enterprises? Generally required a linear kind of growth with human capacity. Now, I think with AI, how do you tailor your phishing attacks? How do you tailor exploits for a given environment? It's going to help accelerate the attackers. And to your point, I do think it then turns into that whole who can use AI more smartly with going after whether you're the adversary or you're the defender.
You've been doing this for a while, obviously. What is that one thing that you see organizations doing over and over from a security perspective that you just shake your head and go, guys, can we just move beyond this?
One of the things is when you invest heavily and you only focus on the most advanced techniques and tactics, you miss the simple things. What I see organizations is they always move on to the new toy, the new shiny object, and they forget about, I still have to invest in knowing where my servers are, knowing what my internet footprint is. Your standard attack surface management capability kind of gets thrown out because it's not the new cool problem. Or they're looking for the advanced way, when in reality, identity attacks continue to be the leading trend, right? The human continues to be that weakest link. So investing in where you get hit the most, you need to not let that go just because you think you got the new capabilities.
So do you think organizations should be mapping out something that feels like a 2 to 3 year plan for cybersecurity and AI? I mean, can I predict what kinds of technologies will be coming down the pike and kind of plan accordingly? Or is this space just moving so fast that every day we're going to wake up and there's going to be something completely different?
What I'm finding is setting up a good data governance and a good governance strategy now in the framework is important. And the reason I look at that is these organizations, every company that is playing with AI or experimenting, all of a sudden they may have a model they want to go take to market. With the budding regulations or the hints of regulations around the globes on explainability and AI trustworthiness in companies' expectations, if you're not protecting the development environments from the attacks that we don't even know about today or the ones that we do know about today within AI, you could set yourself up for failure because you don't know where the data came from. You trained it on data that you didn't legally acquire, or you trained it in a dev environment that was actually compromised because you were just experimenting today. And it's that whole proof of concept to production that if you're not ready for as an organization, and then these regulations come in, or you find this great customer but they need that explainability, that AI trustworthiness, then you're going to be hampered with being able to make revenue on that quick investment that you just made, that awesome finding, that amazing technology, because you didn't put some basic guide rails in place, is what I'm seeing organizations, the successful ones, starting to do.
All right. No conversation about AI is complete without the inevitable question, is my job safe, or are people's jobs going away, or what is the relationship between the man-machine interface going to look like in cybersecurity?
I really feel we need to figure out how to make the machines do what the machines are good at and let the humans focus what the humans are good at. I think it's an acceleration of how do you get the relevant data to make the decisions. And it's going to be a partnership going forward. And how do we be able to scale the humans and the deficit in human cyber capacity that we have across the globe? We'll be able to scale that demand to meet the demands more smartly.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Chances are, if you don't have some AI help in the future, you're probably not going to win the battle anyway. So you might as well get used to looking for some help now. The only question is how quickly might it arrive? David, thanks for being on the show.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for having me today.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Anna Pavlitz, who's head of passwordless for 1Password. And we're talking about where are we in this goal that we all kind of want to achieve, but we've had passwords around since the first caveman ever grunted, "Who goes there?" So, Anna, welcome to the show, and let's just dive in. Where are we on this journey? A lot of people talking about it, but I still log into everything today with a password, so I'm not quite clear where we are.
Yeah, Mike, you're totally right. Like, I also, as someone who knows a lot about password and sees this every day, like I still log into most things with passwords. And so Unfortunately, it's still really early, but I think it's really promising. And I think the big reason for that is all of a sudden in the last couple of years, it's the first time where there's really been a version of something better than a password that's actually better from a user experience. And so all the attempts over the last like 10, 20 years, you have like multi-factor authentication, you'll have magic links and login codes and like some weird forms of biometric that are very proprietary, things like that. Like, those are all maybe more secure in some situations, but they're really hard for users. Like no one wants to get their app out and have to like type in a code or get a text message and a password. And so when I talk about passwordless, I mostly mean passkeys, which are like the public key credentials on your device that you usually protect with like Face ID or Touch ID, something like that, that authenticate to a website for you. And those are both more secure than passwords because there's no secret sauce that's stored on a server, but they're also way better for users. Like logging in with Face ID is so easy, right? Everybody wants to do that. And so I think this is the first time that that's actually happened where security and user experience align with each other. And that's why this is kind of like the first time there's really a chance it could happen.
What are the hurdles then? What do we need to overcome? It almost sounds to me like the technology is kind of solved, but the cultural side of this equation, maybe not so much.
Yeah, there's definitely some work to do on education and exposure, right? Like it's pretty, people are very used to passwords. There's no unknowns there. Like even if you don't like them, you know exactly what you're getting into. And so there's definitely going to be some work to just educate and expose people to this. A concern a lot of people have is around privacy. It seems like when you scan your face or your fingerprint, like you would assume you're probably sending that data to a server or to a website, but you're actually not. Like that information never leaves your device. The whole protocol behind passkeys was designed with user privacy in mind. And so none of that happens, but there's a lot of education to do there. And so I think that will be a big part, educating consumers and just regular people about why they should use passkeys. And the other side is businesses. So it's obviously a lot of work to add a new authentication method to a website. And so that's going to take work and education on why it's better for your users and how to do it safely and easily. Because it's really hard to all of a sudden have to manage a whole bunch of different passkeys when before you just had a password, you check the password, you're in, right? It's a very simple model there. And so there's definitely a more complex implementation. So there's some education to be done on that side as well.
Do you think we might see this in B2B scenarios before B2C? Because companies, they have more control and they can talk to their end users and tell them why we need this, and consumers might come along later.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's possible. I think we're already starting to see it in B2B world a lot, maybe more as a two-factor than it is as a primary factor, but a lot more people will use like YubiKeys or hardware security keys, things along those lines in a B2B world. You definitely have the advantage of controlling. You can kind of just force passkeys on people. You also typically know what devices people use, so you'll know if they have Touch ID available on their device. So I could definitely see it taking off in that world. From my perspective, though, I actually think the benefits are better in a consumer environment, which is sort of the area that I focus on mostly. And the reason for that is because it can actually be like a benefit to a website or to a business in a lot of cases. So if you take an example of like an e-commerce company and you're selling something, there's like a huge cart abandonment problem in a lot of these businesses. People will go to buy stuff, then they have to go create an account to complete that process. They get confused or they're just lazy and they kind of give up, and maybe they'll just go somewhere else where you can check out as a guest instead because they don't want to do that process. But if you can get all that information from them with just like a Touch ID, that's so much better and so much faster, and it actually like could improve your user conversions, revenue, things like that. So there's actually like a very appealing value proposition potentially for those types of companies if they're willing to kind of give it a chance. But I do think at this point right now, we're seeing more traction in B2B.
I think every combination of username and password I might have ever used is on some database somewhere in the dark web. And I suspect it's true for everybody else as well. And I know we're supposed to change our username and passwords more frequently, but we don't. So do you think we're reaching some sort of critical mass of crisis here where we all need to kind of wake up and say, we're making it too easy for the bad guys?
I kind of hope so. I've worked in security pretty much my whole career, and not a lot has changed. It's always add two-factor, make harder password requirements. Like that's so hard. Like I definitely like I probably have fairly good password hygiene compared to a lot of people, but it's still so tedious. I still forget passwords, or I forgot to put one in my 1Password vault, then I never remember what it is and I have to go reset it. Like there's so much complexity there involved, even outside of the security. I think all these breaches that have happened over the last couple of years, it's like probably 80% have to do with passwords and things like that. So I think that's a huge reason for businesses to start thinking about passkeys and supporting that type of technology. It, like, the whole point of it is it completely eliminates any sort of like password-based attack. There is nothing stored on the server. There's no private information that's accessible in that way. And you can't like brute force accounts or things like that. Passkeys are also tied to a specific domain. So like a really common phishing attack is like you make a lookalike domain and then you try to like convince people to like use their credentials on that site. Well, something like this like literally would not work at a protocol level on with using passkeys, which is really, really cool. So even if you maybe trick a person, you won't be able to like trick the underlying technology. I think that's such a huge win. So we're really just trying to like get the word out about that, of like how cool is that? You get this user experience and security. And I think businesses will respond to that.
What role do developers play in this conversation? Because a lot of times they are the ones who are coding secrets, and sometimes they have a vault, and other times they do silly things like leave the credentials in plain text and ship the application. And I'm sure the cyber criminals pretty much laugh their way all the way home. What do you expect from those folks, and what would you like them to do?
Yeah, I think developers are obviously a critical piece of this as the people who are always in charge of authentication systems, especially in consumer applications, and they're going to be the ones implementing a solution here. As part of the auth solution at 1Password, like the number one thing we think about all day, every day is developer experience. Like, how can it be easier? How can we make sure that they're not going to get the security wrong? Like the security aspects, the user experience, you just come out of the box because the technology is new. It's kind of unknown. Like the more problems that we can solve for developers out of the box and they can like go back to their normal jobs, the better. We kind of joke sometimes that like, most developers, like authentication is not like the core thing that they're working on. They have a whole business to run, a whole app to build. Authentication just something they have to do. And so we just want to like make it easy, and then they can move on and like get back to the thing that's actually going to make them money, going to make them happy. That's what they want to be working on.
Do you think IT operations people have a vested interest in this conversation? Because, at least in my experience, half the calls that go to any kind of help desk have something to do with a username and password. So maybe we could just eliminate that conversation and we could do something more meaningful with our lives.
Wouldn't that be great, right? I think there's a huge support cost associated, right? Calling for password resets, all that stuff. Ideally, that really goes down to zero with this type of model. We talk a lot at 1Password about how to better support businesses as well who are using 1Password. And so, IT and internal security organizations can use 1Password to actually manage their passkeys throughout the entire organization rather than maybe relying on platform level passkeys. And so they just have that level of control that they want with passwords across all of their like internal apps and things like that. They have that same level of control with passkeys. And so I think there's a lot of things we can do to help kind of inside of businesses and with their businesses' customers as well. We're kind of focused on both.
You think we might get to a point one day where if you have an application that you're accessing using a username and password combination, that people will be embarrassed by that? They'll consider that an antiquated kind of application immediately, and they won't use it at all.
That's a great point. I dream of this world where instead of me as someone who's like trying to educate people about why this is great and go talk to businesses about why they should want it, instead it's their users being like, hey, how come you don't have this yet? Like all of your competitors have it. Every other app I use has passkeys, and it becomes kind of like a competitive differentiation, and businesses just like need to have it to stay relevant. I'm hoping that happens sooner rather than later. And as consumers start to see it in one place or two places, they'll be like, wow, that's amazing. I obviously want that everywhere. Like, how do I make that happen?
All right. What's your best advice to folks about how to get started? I think everybody kind of wants to do the right thing here, but they don't know where to begin.
That's a great question. So slightly shameless plug, but we have a website called passkeys.directory where we're tracking all the different websites and apps that have passkey support right now. And so as a just regular user on the internet, you can go see what apps you might use that support passkeys, and you can go switch your login to use passkeys, which is really cool. So like on a personal level, you can do that. You can encourage your businesses, wherever you work, to use passkeys. But in a lot of cases, we kind of have to wait for websites to catch up, right? The consumer alone can't really run that themselves, but you can keep an eye on when you see that new apps you're using use passkeys. Go ahead and make the switch.
All right, folks, you heard it here. When it comes to passwords, less is definitely more. Hey, Anna, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, it was great being here.
Back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with experts to give you the latest in the tech industry. And alongside the airing of The Haunted Hacker and our extensive conference sessions, we had plenty of great content today. We'll be back again on Monday, so we hope to see you then. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.